Chapter 468. Buzz. The air trembled with Soren's voice, and in an instant, it was as if there was an invisible spiritual force spreading out and directly covering the whole battlefield. The attack of the orcs stopped abruptly, and a terrible pressure instantly made everyone on the battlefield stiff in place. Not only the orcs who attacked, but even the half-elves on the wall also felt that it was difficult to breathe. Draconic aura. A very powerful draconic aura. It was more powerful than any dragon that Soren had ever seen. Even if they hadn't arrived on the battlefield, the terrible draconic aura had already frightened everyone. The huge dragon that the orc chieftain Eugene rode directly knelt on the ground, and its huge body even trembled a little. It almost trampled the orc warriors next to it to death. Then a crack appeared in the sky, and a portal to another world was opened. Interplanar summoning. When Soren launched the Dragon Covenant, in the name of God, he didn't summon the brass dragons of the material plane, but directly transmitted the summoning contract to all the brass dragons in the multiverse. The existence of the gods was above the mortals. When Soren completed the contract in the name of God, it contained quite a lot of power, and it might even attract some very ancient beings. Roar. The terrible draconic roar came from the sky, and in an instant, the whole battlefield was raging. The soldiers on the battlefield couldn't help but tremble, and there was a trace of real fear in their eyes. Advanced draconic aura. Soren's expression changed slightly, and Eugene's old face showed a trace of horror. The whistling wind came. A huge figure directly swooped down from the crack in the sky, but this was just the beginning. When the first huge bronze figure appeared, 2 more adult dragons appeared. Although they were much smaller than the first dragon that appeared, they were all adult brass dragons. The dragon wings rolled up the wind and sand in the sky, and the terrible pressure shrouded all the mortals. The leading brass dragon spread its wings like a huge shadow. It stared at Soren's incarnation with its eyes that were almost completely melted together like a metal ball. Then, it turned its gaze to the orc in front of it. Flames jumped in its bloody mouth. Not only the leading brass dragon, but the other 2 brass dragons also had scorching breaths in their mouths. 3 terrifying dragon breaths fell from the sky, accompanied by surging heat waves. The flames directly swallowed the orc army in front of them. The 3 dragons flew over the orc army in an instant. The scorching dragon's breath cleared out a line of death in the army's phalanx like plowing the ground. Ancient brass dragon. Soren completed the dragon's covenant in the name of God and summoned an ancient brass dragon that was above level 30. Baby dragon, young dragon, adult dragon, adult dragon, adult dragon, adult dragon, elder dragon, ancient dragon, ancient dragon, ancient dragon, and ancient dragon. The power of a giant dragon would become stronger with time. The dragons that could be seen in the material plane were basically adult dragons. When the strength of a giant dragon reached a certain level, many of them would leave the material plane and go to other worlds. Because it was very rare to see an ancient dragon in the mortal plane, there was only one ancient red dragon that was hiding near Whiterun in the entire material plane. This ancient red dragon just moved its nest, and it caused the collapse of Whiterun and the entire southern kingdom to be in chaos. One could imagine how terrifying the ancient dragon species, which was second only to the primordial dragon, was. Under the influence of the advanced draconic aura, even Soren's incarnation was greatly affected. As for the other mortals on the battlefield, some of them could not even hold their weapons tightly. The long lifespan had turned the scales of the ancient brass dragon into a rather dull copper color, but its defensive ability was far beyond that of other dragons. Such an existence rarely cared about the affairs of the mortal world because they were terrifying existences close to the gods. The ancient dragon's breath almost burned everything. Even weapons made of steel were easily melted into molten iron. Beside it, 2 other adult brass dragons directly crushed the orc army with their dragon's breath. There was no resistance at all. The orcs could not even attack the giant dragons in the sky. The situation on the battlefield was reversed in an instant. Giant dragons. They were creatures that were above the mortal world. When they appeared on the battlefield, it was a terrible disaster in itself. No. Eugene's red pupils stared at the giant dragon in the sky. He watched countless orc warriors being burned to charcoal under the dragon's breath. He roared angrily, then he leaped up, clenched the white bone spear in his hand, and threw it out. The whistling spear broke through the air. The power of the elements made it break through the air like a bolt of lightning. The full blow of the legendary war shaman made the air make a muffled sound like a sonic boom. Clang! In the face of the thrown white bone spear, the ancient brass dragon slammed its tail on the white bone spear with amazing skill and directly knocked it out. Incredible! Soren had never seen a giant dragon with such a dragon tail sweep skill. Perhaps only the ancient dragons who had lived for a long time could reach such a level. Woo woo woo. The bleak sound of a horn was heard. A burly gnoll appeared beside Eugene. It pulled the seemingly crazy orc chieftain and roared, "Retreat! The enemy used the higher dragon covenant. We will die if we stay here. Retreat quickly. These giant dragons won't stay for too long. As long as the army is still there, we can come back. Our Lord Yinagu will send more reinforcements. The warriors of the Blackthorn Knolls can't die for nothing." The giant dragon raged in the sky. The orc army had turned into a sea of fire. Many warriors had already collapsed without Eugene's order. This was an existence that they could not match. Even Sauron in his heyday might not be able to defeat an ancient dragon. Unless there was a saint incarnated by a god, even if a legendary team came, the final result would likely be annihilation. Because the challenge level of the ancient brass dragon was above 24. On the entire battlefield, even if all the orcs and elves were added together, they would not be able to form a team of adventurers with a profession level of 24 or above. They retreated. The orc army retreated. All the orc warriors fled for their lives. Their morale was instantly destroyed by the terrible dragon breath. Eugene's old figure stood in place. He looked at the charred bodies of countless warriors in front of him with sad eyes. Finally, he looked at the white figure on the wall with angry and hateful eyes. The ancient brass dragon was still hovering in the sky, but it did not continue to attack. He did not listen to anyone's orders at all. After completing the dragon covenant and defeating the orc army in front of him, his eyes had been fixed on the old orc. He felt danger. This was the only existence that could threaten him on the whole battlefield if he fell to the ground. The old orc in front of him had some kind of power, a very ancient power, which made him feel like some kind of primitive god, totem, or ancestral power. This kind of power could kill the ancient dragon. Eugene retreated in the end. Even if the opportunity to defeat the elves in one fell swoop was in front of him, he still failed in the end. Because a little girl came out of nowhere and used the advanced dragon covenant. She had the breath of a god. A god that was supposed to have fallen. Soren. This name that made him feel a little familiar inherited the divine title of a fallen god, and then appeared at the most critical moment and ruined all his plans. But he would not give up. Even if the opponent was a god, he would never give up. This was a war that determined the future of the orcs. He would never give up because of a defeat. When he regrouped, he would come back. Autumnfall must be conquered. Otherwise, all the sacrifices would be meaningless. The dragons looked at the defeated enemy. Finally, they turned their eyes to the white figure on the city wall. The ancient brass dragon seemed to frown because it felt that the power of the gods was dissipating. This was not the body of the gods, but a descending chosen. However, it was not angry. Because no one dared to delay the payment of the dragon, even if it was a god. 3 huge figures flew over the city wall of Autumnfall, and many half-elf soldiers trembled involuntarily. The ancient brass dragon flew directly to the most magnificent building in Autumnfall, and then directly relied on its natural intuition to sense gold. The dragon swept and smashed the door of the city's warehouse. The 3 huge figures entered the warehouse. They simply ignored all the people present and looted the vault of Autumnfall in a storm-like manner, taking away all the gold and jewelry in it. The dragons were not stupid. Since this contract summoned them to relieve the siege, then the city naturally had the responsibility to pay them. The dragons did not need the consent of others to take their wages. The ancient brass dragon directly took away all the things it wanted. As if it was not satisfied, it turned its eyes to the super-arcane crystal pulse cannon on the Tower of Autumn Fall, which was now completely decorative. It liked this silver-white barrel very much. The dragon's keen intuition of wealth told it that a lot of mithril was injected in it. So, it opened its mouth and broke the cannon, and then flew to the space crack in the sky with its reward. The god who summoned it seemed to be a bit interesting. The harvest of this trip was comparable to the accumulation of hundreds of years of accumulation. Finally, the figures of the 3 brass dragons left, and the treasury of Loia City became so empty that a horse could run on it. Since it was its reward, it would naturally take as much as it could. The brass dragons of the chaotic good camp did not care so much. Since they saved the city, it was natural for them to think that they could take as much as they wanted. Chapter 469. The dragons were very smart. Although they understood that no one dared to delay the dragon's payment, they also knew that it was more difficult to find a god than to move around in a city. Therefore, they did not hesitate to empty the vault of Autumn Fall. Although the deity had told them the location of his true form before he ended his descent, the smart brass dragons realized that flying across half the continent to ask for a reward from a deity was far more efficient than emptying the city's treasury. They were chaotic and kind brass dragons. Saving a city was in line with their own code of conduct, so naturally, the rest was to do whatever they wanted. After all, a god was a god. Bargaining with a god, after all, there was still a little bit of a grudge in their hearts. The Outer Islands. Soren's figure stood in midair, and the light of divinity in his eyes gradually dissipated. His whole person seemed very tired. The price of a god's descent was not small. Otherwise, the other gods would not rarely appear in the mortal world. This was an act that directly consumed their accumulated divine power. Even the powerful gods had to slowly accumulate their divine power little by little, and this could take hundreds of thousands of years. The new gods were very weak. They did not have much divine power themselves, and some could not even give out divine spells. Many gods' power was slowly familiarized with the rules and evolved using divine power. This process basically took more than 100 or 200 years. However, Soren did not have this concern. Relying on the data flow in his mind, he could directly use Slaughter EXP to replace the conversion of divine power points. Although the price was very heavy, it could save the other gods hundreds of years of time. However, using Slaughter EXP to replace it was not a solution at all. Soren did not have so much Slaughter EXP to consume. If he wanted to strengthen his own divine power, he still had to find a way to accumulate some divine power points. Therefore, priests and believers were particularly important. As long as he accumulated enough divine power points, he would soon be able to master the power of the law that other gods would need hundreds of years to master. This was like an ability point. Divine power points were more important than it. Patter. Soren slowly opened his eyes. He glanced at his remaining Slaughter EXP, and the corner of his mouth could not help but twitch slightly. The temporary arrival of his avatar had consumed a total of 300,000 Slaughter EXP. Fortunately, he could also absorb the soul energy of the enemies killed by his avatar. Otherwise, he would have lost a lot of Slaughter EXP. Now, he had more or less kept half of it. God's Spirit Incarnation. Soren looked at his own data and murmured, unless it's to kill a stronger enemy, using a god's avatar will always be a losing proposition. If I kill a demon, I might be able to earn more than 100,000 Slaughter EXP with a single descent. I wonder if there will be a chance to make use of it in the future. Ordinary warriors gave too little Slaughter EXP. Most of the soul energy that Soren brought back came from the Abyss Knolls. They helped Soren gain at least 100,000 Slaughter EXP. As for the ordinary orc warriors, well, let's not talk about them. The data didn't change much. The most obvious change was that a new page had appeared on Soren's data page. Divine Power Value, 1, under Soren's Divinity Value and Shard of Divinity, there was a new Divine Power Value, which showed that he had 1 point of Divine Power. However, there was a difference from what Soren knew before. There was actually a limit to the increase of divine power. Divine power value, 1160. To upgrade to minor divine power, 100 divine power values are required. Master the law of gods of form change. The limit of divine power stored in the shard of divinity was 160. Finally, he had divine power. At this moment, even Soren couldn't help but feel excited. He had been in the realm of gods for so long, but until now, he had only gained 1 point of divine power. But this was just the beginning. As long as he had divine power, he could bestow divine spells, and then develop his priest followers. Finally, he could gain more divine power. Soren believed that after he started, the speed of accumulating divine power would not be too slow. Come. Soren got up and walked outside. He said in a deep voice, order the fleet to go to Raging Sand Island. Order the other pirate leaders to prepare for action. Unified distribution of supplies to Raging Sand Island. Send someone to contact the person in charge of the Eastern Sea. I'm going to meet with them in 2 days. Orders were issued one by one. Since Soren had made a breakthrough in divine power, he naturally had to act immediately. Night fell. Soren sat in the meeting room and looked at the nautical chart in front of him. His eyes were always fixed on a certain position, as if he was thinking about a difficult decision. Tap, tap, tap. Rapid footsteps were heard. When Soren looked up, Gloria's figure also appeared in front of him. At this moment, Gloria's beautiful face showed a rare excitement. She took a black metal book and came to him. She said in a hurry, "Look what I found. It's near the maze we went to." Spellbook. A spellbook from the Arcane Empire. There's actually a spellbook hidden near the maze. Soren slowly looked up. He didn't seem to understand why Gloria was so excited. Although there were many powerful spells in the Arcane Empire, it was well known that the great arcanists didn't need to rely on spellbooks to memorize them. They were all geniuses who could memorize and cast spells without spellbooks. Therefore, many of the spellbooks left from the Arcane Empire were used by low-level spellcasters. For a legendary witch like her, there weren't many things that could be used. However, when Soren reached out and took the black metal spellbook in front of him, his face suddenly changed dramatically. He even looked quite excited. Because the moment he touched the spellbook in front of him, a row of information prompts also appeared in front of his eyes. Grasped information about advanced profession. Obtained an item to trigger advanced profession. Intelligence is higher than 20 points. Knowledge is higher than 200 points. Spellcasting level is higher than 5. Obtained the ability, Sage. Grasped the ability, Language Proficiency. You have the ability to decipher the language of the Arcane Empire. The basic requirements for advanced profession have been met. You have obtained information about advanced profession, Arcanist, from Wizard. Chapter 470. In the study. Soren slowly flipped open the black metal spellbook in front of him. Along with the faint light of a spell restriction, Soren raised his hand and wiped away the restriction. The owner of this spellbook wasn't very powerful. It probably wasn't even a half-legendary. Soren used his demigod power to crush the restriction spell on the book. Arcanists were powerful, but not all of them could stand shoulder to shoulder with the gods. This kind of restriction spell that could only be used on mortals was useless against Soren. Asterisk crack. Asterisk the black metal cover was flipped open, and the spellbook suddenly shook. When it came into contact with Soren's fingertips, it trembled and was finally suppressed on the table. It's alive? Soren was a little surprised. He closed his eyes and murmured, "It's really alive. But it doesn't have any consciousness. The power of life animate must have been exhausted. It has been a long time since new soul energy was injected." Arcanists had a lot of strange abilities. Their power was not only reflected in destruction. Wizards were respected not because of their destructive power, but because of their creative ability. The appearance of the floating city was the pinnacle of their creativity. Life Animate was a high-level spell that could turn something into a living construct. Soren wasn't interested in wasting Slaughter EXP on a spellbook, so he didn't plan to revive it. This kind of spell consumed a lot of soul energy. Unless there was a soul crystal from the bottomless abyss or the Bator Inferno, which was the kind Soren found in the White Dragon's lair, the consumption of Slaughter EXP could be as high as tens of thousands. Gloria took the soul crystal and injected it into the Thalling experiment ET-1. Currently, the Thalling experiment's soul energy was still insufficient. If it wasn't for the shadow plane, Gloria would have probably gone to the Bator Inferno. From both Soren and Gloria's point of view, the progress of the Thalling experiment was much more important than anything else. They were like biological computers with enormous computing power. Unraveling the secrets of the Shadow Plane Wizard Tower required ET-1's scanning and computing abilities. The paper of the spellbook felt like human skin. It seemed that this spellbook had been strengthened to a certain level. The Arcane Empire was rich in resources, and the Arcanists might have enough soul crystals to spend. Soren glanced at the preface of the book and quickly turned the pages. Soren had never seen these characters before. In fact, when he first saw them, Soren didn't recognize them at all. However, he immediately recognized them. Not only could he recognize them, but he could also fully understand these arcane runes. This was because he had the language proficiency ability as a demigod. Soren could read and understand any language. This was the power of a god. Retentive memory. Encyclopedic knowledge. Erudite knowledge. It took Soren less than half an hour to finish reading and memorize the entire spellbook in front of him. There were at least a few 100,000 words written in it, and there were also many complicated patterns and symbols. However, Soren had memorized all of them. Ever since he obtained the divinity, Soren's memory ability seemed to have been further strengthened. Sometimes, he only needed to take a glance to memorize something. So this is how spellcasting was done in the Arcane Empire. Soren frowned and closed the spellbook in front of him. He murmured, "It seems like they didn't leave the magic net to cast spells. Could it be that only a great arcanist can do this?" Humans were talented. There was a legendary advanced profession called Great Wizard. It could be upgraded to level 5 at most, and it was a very powerful advanced profession. There was also a legendary advanced profession called Great Arcanist. In the entire Arcane Empire, there weren't many people who could be called Great Arcanist. I have a wizard level of 10, so I have a basic spellcasting foundation. I should be able to level up successfully, right? Soren stood up and thought. He murmured to himself, "I've seen some powerful character templates in the Arcane Empire. It seems like they all started from Arcanist. If I start from Wizard, won't I have a lower starting point? I wonder if I can level up to the level of Great Arcanist." Back in the day, there was a standard path for powerful spellcasters to level up. Wizard, Candlehold Scholar, Great Wizard. What Soren was a little worried now was that the way Arcanists and Wizards cast spells was different. Arcanists were like spellcasters who combined the abilities of wizards and warlocks. He wasn't sure if the two professions could be compatible because many of the abilities of wizards couldn't reach the standard of arcanists. The goddess of magic had castrated many of the wizard's abilities. There was no point in hesitating. In the end, he had to try it himself. Soren still had about 200,000 Slaughter EXP, which was enough for him to level up as an arcanist. Whether the two professions could be compatible or not, he would know after trying it out. Level up to Arcanist, successful. Arcanist has leveled up to level 1. Received 28, INT 22 plus, INT 22 to 10, *0. 5. Skill points, HP increased by 10, profession HP 4 plus, con 22 to 10, *0. 5. You have learned the Arcanist ability, Arcana Memory. You have learned the Arcanist ability, Arcana Rune. You have learned the Arcanist ability, Arcana Counterspell. Your ability, Counterspell, has been replaced. Unknown conflict. Some abilities of the advanced profession, Arcanist, have failed. Some effects of arcana memory have been automatically converted. Energy interference from the weave. Mana shackle has failed. Forceful removal of mana restriction has resulted in loss of spellcasting ability. Contact with the deeper structure of the weave. Connect to the weave in the arcana circuit. Arcana memory has automatically fused with arcana memory. Level up complete. Arcanist ability has been converted to a wizard's profession. Spellcasting ability has been restored. Pain. Soren's brain was in pain for a moment, as if he had touched a terrifying high-voltage electrical grid. That was the power of the weave. Compared to the massive weave system, Soren's ability was instantly crushed. Then, he lost his spellcasting ability, and the weave system rejected his access. However, as the data in his brain was converted, the weave system reopened its doors to him. Soren felt his consciousness enter a deeper place within the weave. This place did not seem to be left behind by the goddess of magic, but more like a back door opened by some powerful existence, using the loopholes in the weave itself. The inner weave. Sauron's eyes widened in shock. He suddenly found that he had actually entered the inner part of the weave. In the grid of the weave outside the weave system, there was an even more special inner weave space. Arcana memory, profession ability. Arcanists have mastered a special technique that allows them to come into contact with the weave and understand the structure of the weave itself. When coming into contact with the inner weave, arcanists can automatically recall spells that they have already cast, and there is no need for them to memorize spells again. An arcanist will retain the original spell model of the spell, and as time passes, this model will automatically be reconstructed. After a certain period of time, arcanists will once again recall spells that they have cast, even if they do not have time to rest or meditate. Level 0 spells will be recalled after 10 minutes, Level 1 spells will take 1 hour, Level 2 spells will take 2 hours, Level 3 spells will take 4 hours, Level 4 spells will take 6 hours, Level 5 spells will take 8 hours, Level 6 spells will take 12 hours, Level 7 spells will take 16 hours, Level 8 spells will take 20 hours, Level 9 spells will take 24 hours, and Legendary spells will take 7 days. Note, Arcana memory is not compatible with the wizard's profession level. Back in the day, Arcanists were level 1, and could only recall level 0 and level 1 spells. Arcana memory will increase with the level of the Arcanist. He still had no mana. As long as the weave did not collapse, the chaotic energy would not interfere with spellcasting. As an Arcanist, Soren still needed spell slots to complete the process of casting spells. However, he seemed to have understood some of the secrets of the Arcane Empire. Although he did not release his mana, Soren had the ability to recall spells. He could automatically recall spells that he had cast without meditation. The only pity was that Arcanists were not compatible with wizards. As a level 1 Arcanist, Soren could only automatically recall a level 0 spell that he had used every 10 minutes, and a level 1 spell that he had used every 1 hour. But even so, Soren could deeply feel the power of Arcanists. Spells could be automatically recalled. The inner weave within the weave was actually able to store the original spell models and automatically reconstruct the memories over time. All spells, including legendary spells, could be automatically recalled. The only difference was that the amount of time it would take to do so would vary. This ability, compared to the original adepts who had used up all their spell slots without meditating, the difference was like heaven and earth. Illuminate. A ray of light appeared on Soren's fingertips, and the bright light shone in the study room. With his current spellcasting ability, he could maintain it for a long time, and this was only a level 0 spell. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. As the 10 minutes passed, Soren found that the level 0 spell models that he had used were restored. P.S. Today's update. There are 2 more. Chapter 471. Outer Islands. Battleships were ready to set sail. A fog appeared on the sea, and Soren's figure stood quietly on the sea. There were many coolies on the dock who were responsible for transporting goods. There were nearly 5,000 slaves in the city of Mordor, so the labor force was relatively abundant. Soren's eyes looked into the distance. From time to time, he closed his eyes to sense something. Sometimes, he would fall into meditation. His whole body seemed to be integrated with some kind of special force. Advancing into an arcanist did not make him much stronger, but there was no doubt about the potential of an arcanist. At present, the two most useful abilities should be these: arcane rune, profession ability. Arcanists master mysterious runes. These runes can be used to make and strengthen weapons and equipment. Arcane runes are quite stable, which makes arcanists more successful in making rare-grade equipment. Arcane runes can have special effects in many aspects. They can be used in spell refinement and magic devices. Many advanced arcane runes can easily make legendary equipment. Arcane runes. A structural rune similar to a spell circuit. Its biggest use was to make items. Soren's alchemy ability was not enough. Although he had mastered more than 20 arcane runes, it would be difficult for him to make a rare-grade equipment. However, Gloria was a master in this field. After coming into contact with these arcane runes, she immediately found a way to perfect the Silver Sword of Gith. According to her own estimation, if nothing unexpected happened, she could upgrade the Silver Sword of Gith to a legendary item. A wizard who could make legendary items was quite precious. Soren naturally fully supported this. He directly allocated more than 100,000 Kindler to Gloria to ensure that she could buy the corresponding materials from the Witch Council at any time. If possible, he hoped to see the finished product of a legendary item as soon as possible. The second specialty was arcane counterspell. It was different from counterspell, in that it was a very powerful combat specialty. Arcane counterspell, profession ability. Arcanists understand the structure of the weave better than other casters. They are able to counteract the spells cast by their enemies. Although this requires extremely high intelligence and comprehension ability, if the counter is successful, the arcanist can directly reflect the enemy's spells back. The effect is similar to small spell deflection. After the counter is successful, the arcanist can reflect level 1 to level 3 spells back to the caster. Remarks: prerequisite for advanced arcane counterspell. Reflect spells. That was right. This was the arcanist's counter ability. Once successful, it could directly reflect a level 1 to 3 spell back to the caster. Soren's intelligence wasn't that high, but as his divine domain grew stronger, his basic attributes would continue to increase. Currently, he had a very high success rate of using counter-arcane spells against low-level wizards. If he was surrounded, his counter-arcane spells would be able to surprise his enemies. Soren had 2 divinity points, and after obtaining it, all of his stats would increase by 1. If Soren used this as a foundation, it wasn't impossible for him to increase his intelligence to 30 points in the future. Let's go. The sea under Soren's feet broke open, and the ghost ship, Deadman's voice, broke through the waves. The dark mast rose from behind him. The drowned undead on the deck looked ferocious, and his body was surrounded by a faint black aura. This was the power of death. The ghost ship had further mutated during the slaughter, and the drowned undead's ability gradually increased with the addition of more undead. As an undead construct, the ghost ship had touched the edge of the legendary realm. It was hard to imagine. What kind of ability would a ghost ship have if it was promoted to the legendary realm? Warships set sail and left Port Mordor directly. Soren's actions inadvertently attracted a lot of attention, but everyone was now guessing what he was going to do. Raging Sand Island. A few days passed like this. Since Soren's order was issued, warships had been docked on this island. Now the port here was full of warships. When Soren's ghost ship appeared, the warships followed the ghost ship to the eastern route. Hundreds of warships stretched for more than 10 miles, moving in an oppressive posture along the eastern route. Because of the large-scale movements of the pirates, the entire southern kingdom was nervous. Many principalities dispatched heavy troops to guard the port cities, vigilant of these pirates landing on land at any time. Dragonhead Warship. Soren glanced at the others in front of him, spread out the map in front of him, and said in a deep voice, "Here, here, and here. The Agate River is the only river we can enter the inland. Most of us stop near the estuary, and the others lead the elites to enter the inland with me. The Agate River. This river was like the Yangtze River and Yellow River. It was one of the largest rivers in the southern region, and the only river that could allow large warships to sail. Soren could not give up the advantage of the water, so he could only go along the Agate River to Autumn Fall. Your Excellency. The half-elf first mate's expression was a little puzzled, and whispered, "Are we making such a big move just to enter the inland?" Soren had not explained the specific mission so far. If other pirate kings did this, I'm afraid many people would throw away the burden, but Soren was different. His reputation among the pirates was too high. Even if no one knew why he gave such an order, the pirate leaders still obediently carried it out. Of course not. Soren glanced at the pirate leaders present. His eyes swept over the one-eyed man, Scarface, Giant, and other pirate leaders. Seeing that they were all puzzled, Soren's mouth could not help but evoke a smile, and slowly said, "We're here to pick someone up." Pick someone up? Hearing Soren's words, the pirate leaders present were even more puzzled. Who were they picking up? Who needed to be picked up by such a big force? This time they dispatched more than 500 warships, and the pirates mobilized more than 10,000 people. All the people were on standby on the road, ready to receive at any time. Such a big move. Was it just to pick someone up? They thought that Sir Soren was going to attack some kingdom. Although they still did not understand, it did not hinder the pirate leaders from continuing to carry out the mission. Soon, the half-elf first mate led the dragon warship and the third fleet to wait at the estuary of the Agate River, while the other pirate leaders led their elite troops to follow Soren into the inland area. The eastern pirates had already greeted them, and the nobles in the southern region were a little panicked. They did not know why such a huge pirate army suddenly gathered here. This even alarmed many powerful organizations, as well as the gods' churches. However, in this special period, no one dared to act rashly. These pirates seemed to be planning to go up the Agate River. As long as they did not attack the nearby cities, it was estimated that no one would dare to provoke Soren. So, a large group of pirates swaggered along the Agate River and gradually approached the direction of Autumn Fall. Autumn Fall. With the retreat of the orc army, the ruined city also recovered a trace of vitality. However, although the orc army had retreated for nearly a week, the tense atmosphere in the city still did not ease at all. Because after the battle, the forces of Autumn Fall were divided into 3 factions. The first faction was Droll. The number of half-elf Droll had always been large, and many of them were in high positions. As for how Autumn Fall should deal with the attack of the orcs, the Droll faction's idea was to ask the elves and Droll organization for help, and use their strength to repel the orcs' attack. However, at the beginning of the siege, the elves did not send troops at all. Although the Droll organization gave some help, they were busy looking for the traces of the devil recently and did not give much support at all. Therefore, this faction's voice was not high. The second faction was the traditional nobles of Autumn Fall. They were the backbone of Autumn Fall and the main force to defend the city. Because the dragon looted the treasury of Autumn Fall after the battle, the power of the nobles was hit hard. Most of them were unwilling to take out their private property to help the city through the difficulties. Because of the lack of military pay and materials, the morale of the army in Autumn Fall was low. The nobles had been very active recently. On the one hand, they were busy drawing together, and on the other hand, they were busy criticizing the power of the last faction. The last faction was the church. After the end of the orc siege, the priests of the original god of half-elves and rogues quickly gathered around the Holy Spirit priest, Milan. The number of these priests was not large. Many of them fought in the front line to protect civilians in the siege, and the proportion of casualties was close to 30%. But they had a high reputation among the civilians, especially when the orcs besieged the city. Milan invited the incarnation of the gods to come and finally summoned the dragon to lift the siege. At that time, countless people saw the dragons hovering in the sky and trembled under their dragon's power, so the influence of the church recovered in a short time. A church that had lasted for hundreds of thousands of years naturally could not disappear so easily. Since the god who came claimed to be the god of half-elves, then he was the new successor, and the church naturally needed to serve this god. The original system was not destroyed. The biggest change was that the Holy Spirit priest, Milan, became the current supreme leader of the church. Before the god clearly appointed a new patriarch, the status of the gods chosen was far higher than that of other priests. This third force was also the source of the chaos in autumn fall. Because the Holy Spirit priest Milan conveyed the first decree of the gods on the first day after she woke up. A bigger disaster is coming. Only by leaving autumn fall and moving along the river can we avoid these disasters. The gods will arrange for people to meet them, and eventually they will take a big ship to live safely overseas. Chapter 472. When this oracle was conveyed, the whole city of autumn fall was shaken. The power of the aristocrats firmly opposed the migration. They could not accept giving up the city of autumn fall like this. Because they were all aristocrats with great wealth and status, this wealth was more because of the land. If they gave up the city of autumn fall like this, then they would have nothing. Almost most of the aristocrats thought this was a quite stupid decision. Moreover, they blamed the church headed by Milan, thinking that it was they who made the city of autumn fall bankrupt. After looting the treasury, they could not even pay a penny for the army. The attitude of the droll was more neutral. They realized that if there was no help, when the orc army came back, they might not be able to defend autumn fall. However, their point of view was that if they wanted to migrate, they should move closer to the elven forest. The droll church could take these refugees, at least they did not have to travel long distances overseas. Unfortunately, their point of view could not be agreed by too many people because many people understood that the elves might not be willing to accept a large number of refugees. Settling these refugees was also a big problem. Food, land, materials. This heavy burden, now a little opposite to the droll church, the royal family of the elves may not be willing to take over. However, the church's power was not high because if there was a choice, most people were not willing to leave their homes. Although the church had a high reputation among the civilians, when the oracle was really conveyed, there were very few people who could respond. The temple hall. A middle-aged priest with a beard stood in the middle. He glanced at the others and said, "Are we really going to give up here? Are we really going to leave here? We lack food and enough warriors." Although the guards of the temple can protect some people, once a large-scale migration is carried out, it will inevitably alarm the orc scouts. Civilians can't escape from the orcs' pursuit. In the end, we may be wiped out. Besides, without food, we can't eat enough. If we can't eat enough, we won't have the strength to walk. The oracle only told us to follow the river, but did not tell us where to go. Relying only on the warriors of the temple, I'm afraid that we will be wiped out by the orc army less than 50 miles away from autumn fall. The middle-aged priest opened the map and pointed at a few locations. Eugene's army has retreated. But here, and here, there are orc outposts stationed here. Their scouts have already surrounded us. If we move the civilians on a large scale, it is impossible to hide from these scouts. From here to here, the orcs' light cavalry can block all our routes in half a day. I can't imagine what a terrible disaster would happen if a large number of civilians were caught by the orc army. Once we leave the city, it will be impossible for us to retreat. There was dead silence in the temple. Milan's delicate face was a little confused. As the most devout Saint Cardinal, she was only responsible for delivering the oracle. As a little girl, she didn't know much about how to do it. At this moment, she could only look hesitant. Then what should we do? This was the will of the gods. He told us that there will be an even greater disaster. If we don't leave now, I'm afraid we will lose even more. A sigh was heard. An old man in bishop attire walked out and said slowly, "Your Excellency Saint Priest. It's not that we don't want to listen to the will of the gods. But the problem now is that we can't leave at all. Although our prayers can be answered by the Lord, He still hasn't given us any divine spells. Without divine spells, our power will be greatly weakened. It's impossible to protect so many civilians. Your Excellency, please look outside. There are a group of old, weak, women, and children outside. The rest are either farmers or militia. Such a force may be useful in defending the city, but once you encounter an orc army in the wild, I'm afraid it's impossible to fight at all. The temple became quite quiet. The priests present looked at each other. Obviously, they all understood that what they said was true. It was impossible to protect the civilians with just the guards outside. However, at this moment, a young female priest stood out. She was wearing silver armor and holding a war hammer in her hand. She looked valiant. Her name was Fina. She once appeared in Soren's dream. In the dream, she lost her brother and knelt in front of the statue and cried. The war seemed to have made her mature a lot. There was an extra scar on the side of her face. Although it destroyed her beautiful face, it made her more determined. God said that someone will help us. Fina glanced at the others present and said slowly, "It's difficult to defend Autumn Fall. When the orc army regroups, it's almost impossible for us to defend the city. The gnolls from the abyss are ready to move. Once the believers of Yeenagu, the king of the gnolls, join the battle, I'm afraid we won't even last 3 days. I don't want to leave here either. But we have no other choice. Our warriors have suffered heavy losses. It's impossible to defeat the enemy with our current strength. Now there are refugees everywhere in the city. If this continues, only death awaits them." Fina stood up and walked to the center of the hall, looking at the others and said, "The most important thing now is to be prepared and wait for the arrival of the gods. Since our Lord has answered our prayers, then he won't give up on us easily. Now the most important thing is to gather the people who are willing to follow us." Many civilians had nothing. They were not as attached to their land as the nobles. Many people just wanted to escape the war and find the hope of survival, and the gods were their only support. If there was a safe retreat plan, there would be many people willing to leave. What about the nobles? The middle-aged priest glanced at Fina in front of him and said slowly, "I'm afraid they won't let us leave." Fina's eyes became fierce, and she said in a deep voice, "It's their decision to stay or leave. For those who are willing to follow our Lord overseas, they have no right to tell them what to do. The land can be taken back if it's lost. As long as people are still there, there is still hope. I can't let my people stay here and wait for death." There was a dead silence in the temple. The priests present could not help but look gloomy. The orcs still had tens of thousands of troops, and Eugene himself was a powerful war shaman. From any point of view, the strength of the two sides was no longer equal. Agate River. Soren looked at the mountains in the distance, his expression seemed to be thinking about something. It was not far from Autumn Fall, and he would be able to reach Autumn Fall by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. Everything was going according to plan, and his priest would tell him the important things in prayer every day. For the situation in Autumn Fall, Soren did not care much. He only needed to pick up those who were willing to follow him. As for how the others chose, it was their business. Soren did not intend to be dragged into the quagmire again. It was not easy for him to establish a safe rear in the outer islands. Naturally, he would not involve himself in the disputes on the mainland. As for helping Autumn Fall defeat the orc army, it was even more impossible. Not to mention whether Soren had the ability to defeat Eugene's army, whether the pirates were willing to fight for the half-elves, just the loss was unbearable for Soren. He controlled the 3 seas. He had a large number of territories, routes, and chambers of commerce under his command. If the pirate army was consumed in Autumn Fall, or if they were hit hard by the orcs, then it could be said that Soren's rear would be in chaos. He did not know how many forces were eyeing him in the dark. Those who were suppressed and cleaned up by cruel means, as long as they waited for an opportunity, they would definitely fight back crazily. At that time, everything would have been for naught. Moreover, the Avatar crisis was coming, and taking Autumn Fall may not be able to survive the turbulent years. This was a dead end. P.S. The 3rd update is complete. Chapter 473. A drizzle fell from the sky. As the terrain in front of him gradually widened, Soren's expression gradually became serious. They were already close to Autumn Fall, and they would be able to reach it by this afternoon at the latest. Autumn Fall City was not built on a river like Amber City. It was about 20 to 30 miles from the Agate River to the Autumn Leaves Plain to Amber City. The Orc army did not retreat to the northwest. They occupied a large area of land and were now stationed near a large town north of Autumn Fall. Spread out the scouts. Soren looked at the high ground in front of him and silently calculated the distance. He then said in a deep voice, "Let them pull out the Orcs' outpost. One Eye, you will personally lead the team." With Soren's order, One Eye stood up with a grim expression and grinned, "Yes. Don't worry, Your Excellency. I guarantee that no one will be left alive." Soon. A figure jumped into the Agate River from the warship. These people drifting on the sea were excellent swimmers. In the blink of an eye, they came ashore one after another. The leader was One Eye. He sent a signal to the warship and quickly led hundreds of people to disappear. These pirate leaders had long been prepared for battle. Today, they were all veterans, and many of them were elites with a profession level of 10 or above. From the Battle of the Swamp King, to defeating the Pirate King Ashrod, then to the naval battle of Arendelle, and finally to defeating the navy of the southern island countries, Soren's pirate army had grown into a group of elites. Only a real battle of life and death could quickly train a group of elites. The weather of April had gradually become hot. Ugly Monkey squatted in the grass and crawled forward, careful not to make any sound. There were a few people on his side, all of them were the elites of their team. Ugly Monkey was a thief. The reason why he had this nickname was because of the ugly birthmark on the left side of his face. A dark green and ferocious birthmark had completely ruined his originally pretty good looks. He was born in Shipwreck Bay, and his mother was a prostitute. It was said that when he was born, his mother was still sick. Anyway, she didn't know how to describe it. He was born very ugly and slightly deformed. Logically speaking, it would have been difficult for him to survive given his birth. However, Ugly Monkey was quite lucky. When he was very young, he met an old bandit who had retired. The old man pitied him for his hard life and took him in as his disciple. Since he was 3 years old, he had taught him some thief skills. Ugly Monkey's bones were deformed. His arms were of different lengths, and his back was naturally a little flat. However, God had taken care of him. He was very agile, and his mental reflexes were far superior to others in the same field. That was why he was given the nickname Ugly Monkey. Everyone said that his movements were as agile as a monkey's. When he was only 14 or 15 years old, Ugly Monkey had already displayed thief skills that far surpassed his peers. His harvest was much greater than the others. However, these days did not last for long. After that, His Excellency, Throat Cutter, appeared, and the forces of the gray area outside the Shipwreck Sea were all taken in. Unsurprisingly, Ugly Monkey also joined this Excellency's forces. He used to steal, but he wasn't good at fighting. After His Excellency, Throat Cutter, took control of the Shipwreck Sea, a group of bandits like him were gathered together. At that time, he really began to learn how to fight, including some assassination skills. Any city near the coast had many low-level jobs. There were many people like Ugly Monkey, but he was the most talented one among them. The instructor in charge of his training told him that he was not even 20 years old. If he was diligent enough, he might be able to enter the realm of legends in this lifetime. Legend. For any professional, this was an unattainable realm that they yearned for. The instructor said that the best rogue and the best assassin on the coast was His Excellency, Throat Cutter. If he could make a great contribution in the future, he might be able to get guidance from His Excellency, Throat Cutter. Therefore, Ugly Monkey did not hesitate to participate in this operation, and he chose the most dangerous job, the outpost scout. Stealth, tracking, and assassination. Ugly Monkey had received strict anti-reconnaissance training. There was also a forest ranger in his team. Not long after the operation, they found traces of the orcs. The traces of these guys were very obvious. Because they were tall and many of them weighed more than 200 pounds, the footprints on the ground could help them determine their position. The rhythmic croaking of frogs sounded. Ugly Monkey unsheathed the short sword at his waist. His eyes sharpened. His strength was not high. This was his natural weakness. Therefore, he liked to apply poison to his weapons during battle. This way, he could defeat his enemies more easily. He thought that he was more suitable to be an assassin than a rogue. It was said that His Excellency, Throat Cutter's army had a group of elite assassins made up of high-grade rogues, and he hoped that he could join them one day. Thump. There was a slight sound of falling to the ground, as if it was a signal. In an instant, more than 10 figures rushed out from the darkness. A cold light flashed past. Ugly Monkey's figure rushed out like an agile monkey, easily crossing a distance of more than 10 meters. At the same time, he used his hands and feet to quickly pass the obstacles in front of him, and the short sword instantly pierced the enemy's heart. The whistling of the wind sounded. The enemy's strength was great, and they waved their weapons with a strong wind, but they were not agile enough. For Ugly Monkey, these enemies were too slow. Clang! Ugly Monkey waved his hand and a cold light flashed, and the sharp dagger pierced the enemy's back. A dual-wielding battle. As a rogue who had been trained since childhood, Ugly Monkey could use his fingers to quickly pick out slippery locust from a pot of oil when he was 7 years old. In order to improve his skills, he even learned how to perform tricks from a magician when he was 12 years old. It was not a level 0 trick, but a magic trick that relied purely on the speed of the fingers to deceive the eyes. During this period of training, his left and right hands had become quite agile. From then on, he began to practice the ability to use both hands to steal at the same time. Roar! The orc's painful roar was heard. Ugly Monkey looked at the orc's appearance and could not help but curl his lips. It's so ugly. Based on his familiarity with the human body, Ugly Monkey judged that his attack had injured the orc's kidney, so he was not in a hurry to kill the enemy. Instead, he was very agile and was delaying the battle. As expected, the orc in front of him gradually slowed down, and its strength began to decline. Looking for an opportunity, Ugly Monkey twisted his body and kicked the orc's lower body. Accompanied by some kind of cracking sound, he swung his short sword and cut the orc's throat. The battle ended quickly. Ugly Monkey glanced at his companions who appeared, and used his dagger to cut off the orc's right ear, then quickly disappeared into the darkness. His companions chuckled beside him. They were obviously saying that the orc scouts were only so-so. Ugly Monkey heard this and pursed his lips, but did not have any intention of replying. These were only a small group of enemies. In a one-on-one fight, it was almost impossible for them to win against these rogues who grew up in the lower 9 kingdoms. However, if they encountered a large group of enemies, the battle would not be so easy. The orc's strength advantage was still very obvious. These hybrid creatures were much stronger than the laborers at the docks. If they had the advantage in numbers, the battle would not be so easy. Thinking of this, Ugly Monkey took out a small mechanism. It was an exquisite sleeve arrow. Ugly Monkey fixed it on his wrist and loaded it with 3 poisoned arrows. He was naturally weaker than others, so naturally, he needed to rely on more techniques. The others in the group saw his movements. As the only existence in this group who was close to a high-grade profession, when Ugly Monkey loaded the sleeve arrow, they could not help but be stunned for a moment. Then they began to take out crossbows, sleeve arrows, and poison darts and equip them in hidden positions. After all, this was a matter of life and death. The more careful they were, the more likely they would be to survive. They were not warriors who fought head-on, and they had too many low-grade fighting skills. The sun gradually set in the west. Soren's scouts were like a net, covering the battlefield near autumn fall. Chapter 474. Autumn Fall City, Temple. Milan, who was kneeling in the center of the temple, suddenly opened her eyes. Her eyes were dazzling. She stood up in an instant and said excitedly, "Prepare to transfer the believers. Our Lord is coming." Arrange the temple guards immediately. We will first transfer the most devout believers to a safe place. Our Lord has already led the army here. Everyone in the temple was surprised. But then the priest gave the order. The remaining guards of the temple also moved quickly and arranged people to transfer here. You want to transfer the most devout believers. Milan stood up and said with a serious expression, these people are the easiest to arrange. They are willing to obey our orders. As for the others, wait until the first batch of people is sent away. In just a few days. This little girl, who was only in her teens, had matured a lot. Although she still looked young, she was a lot more experienced in doing things. As the only priest of the church, she had learned a lot during this time. Yes. The temple guard responded. Soon. There was a lot of noise outside. Many people were hesitant to leave now. However, there were still many devout believers who immediately prepared to leave together because the siege of Autumn Falls City had frightened them. The majesty of the dragon had left a mark on their hearts. In the priest's words, their new god was a powerful god who could control the dragon. As long as they left here, the god could provide them with safety and protection. In the crowd, a pale mother hugged her child. Although the crisis in Autumn Falls City was temporarily lifted, the food was still not enough. Her delicate face was a little panicked. She held the baby in her arms with both hands and moved slowly with the crowd. At this time, a man dressed as a militia came over and quickly walked to her side. He hurriedly said, "Sister, are you really going to leave with them? The general said that there will be elven reinforcements soon. We can defeat those orcs." The beautiful woman turned to look at him. A trace of tears appeared in the corner of her eyes. She murmured, "How long will it take? Even if we can defeat the orcs? How long will it take? How much blood will we lose? We have no food. I'm afraid, my child, and I can't hold on until then. I'm not afraid of death. But I want him to live." The young mother looked at the wide-eyed infant in her arms. There were wounds on her fingers. That was when she had used her blood to feed the child in her arms when food was the most scarce. The little baby was very courageous. Even when he saw so many people panicking, he still didn't cry. He just stared at everything with his eyes wide open, as if he could feel something. When the young mother's gaze fell on the baby, she immediately became gentle. She shook her head with a firm expression and whispered, "I'm sorry. I plan to bring him to a safe place and raise him slowly. There's no hope in staying here. Even if I defeat the orcs, I won't be able to carry him through this autumn." The militia next to him fell silent. A trace of hesitation appeared on his face. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "All right. I'll leave with you. I can't let you go so far with the child alone." After speaking, the young half-elf looked at the city walls in the distance with a trace of sadness on his face. He was a brave warrior. If he could, he would never want to leave his hometown. But now he had to face a dilemma. One was to stay here to protect his home and eventually find a way to defeat the orcs. The other was to protect his sister and go overseas together, waiting for the day when he could recover his homeland. One was his hometown, and the other was his only surviving relative. In the end, he chose the latter. Hurried footsteps sounded. A young figure rushed into the temple and shouted to the priests present, "Warships! So many warships! Over at the Agate River. It's full of warships. We're saved. Scouts." In this case, only scouts would leave Autumn Fall. The young man, who seemed to have more elven blood, was excited and hurriedly said, "Army. The Lord's army has arrived. The god of half-elves and rogues." The remaining strength of the church was not only the priests, but also many half-elven rogues. As soon as the oracle was delivered, the church sent out many rogues. Milan's face showed a smile. She knelt on the ground and prayed, then stood up and said, "Let's go now. Everyone pack up and escort the believers away." At this moment, the voice of a middle-aged priest sounded. He looked more like a noble than a priest. He said in a deep voice, "Leave like this? There are orc troops wandering nearby. What if we meet them on the road? We can't hold on for long." Fina frowned and looked at him. She said in a deep voice, "The Lord will naturally meet us. Let's go now." At this time, it was almost afternoon. After a busy day, thousands of believers quickly gathered. These were the most devout believers of the church. After the oracle was delivered, they chose to leave together without hesitation. The south gate of Autumn Fall opened. The first to come out were the temple guards, then some of the militia, followed by the mighty civilians, and the priests in charge of the rear. On the city wall, a well-dressed noble silently watched the crowd in front of him leave. His eyes were cold and had been staring at the figure of Milan. "Your Excellency." A middle-aged man who looked like an officer came to him and said in a deep voice, "Are you going to let them leave like this? If they leave, the hearts of the people in the city will scatter. I'm afraid our situation will be more difficult next." The well-dressed noble turned and looked at him. He said with a cold expression, "I know. Withdraw the people from the front line. They can't reach the Agate River before dark. As long as they leave here, they will be exposed to the orc army." Speaking of this, his expression was cold. Yes. Most of the believers were old, weak, women, and children, or ordinary civilians. These people were quite slow. It was absolutely impossible for them to reach the Agate River before dark. If they were found by the orc army, the final result was almost needless to say. How could a group of civilians fight against a powerful orc army in the wild? The middle-aged officer's face suddenly turned ugly. After understanding the reason why the noble let them go, he could not help but feel a little unbearable in his heart. Unless there was someone on the way, the final result of these people would be miserable. As long as they were caught, it would be a massacre. And if these people were slaughtered by the orc army, the civilians in Autumn Fall would never have the idea of leaving again. This would also be a major blow to the prestige of the church. In this case, the noble parliament would have absolute control. The sky gradually darkened. The priests had urged the crowd to speed up as much as possible, but it was impossible for so many old, weak, women, and children to walk fast. There were many orphans of soldiers in the crowd. Those women holding children had not eaten a full meal for a long time. Now they were even more tired. Now the sky was dark, and they had only walked about half of the way. If the orc scouts found them, then they were likely to be caught by the enemy. "It's too slow." The old bishop glanced at the bloated and slow team and murmured, "I'm afraid the orcs have found us. Let the temple guards prepare for battle. The militia stay to protect the believers. Others, prepare for battle with me." Half a day had passed. It was almost impossible for this mighty team to not be discovered. If they were discovered, it would not take long for the enemy army to appear. The old man bowed his head and prayed a few words, then slowly said, "Now we can only hope that the Lord's reinforcements can come to meet us. Otherwise, we may not make it to the Agate River." Woo woo woo. The bleak sound of a horn was heard. The crowd suddenly made a panic cry. Countless people looked into the distance in horror. The figures of the orcs appeared in the distance. Although the night affected their vision, they could still see the enemy approaching quickly. "Prepare for battle. Prepare for battle. Temple guards, follow me. Others, take the civilians and leave." The old man in a bishop's costume pulled out a long sword from his waist. He clenched a steel shield and rushed to the rear. At the same time, he shouted, "Don't panic. Go in the direction of the Agate River. The Lord's reinforcements are in front. Priests, stay. Servants of the church. Warriors of the temple. We can't abandon the believers. Those who can fight, follow me to stop the enemy from approaching. This is the last darkness before the dawn. The Lord's army will come soon. For the glory of the Lord. Prepare for battle. Awoo." The desolate howl of wolves sounded. With the reverberation of the dull war drums, dozens of orc cavalry riding huge wolves rushed out from the side of the orc army. It was more difficult to raise these ferocious beasts than to raise a heavy cavalry. Even with the strength of the orcs, they could only train a small team. Now, the wolf cavalry team bypassed the orc army and rushed to the retreating civilians. The orc warriors had already appeared in front of them. Facing the wolf cavalry that was getting closer and closer to the crowd, the temple guards who stayed behind could not support them at all. The distance was getting closer. The shadow of death shrouded everyone. Once the wolf cavalry rushed into the crowd, it would be a massacre. Chapter 475. The distance was getting closer and closer. The stench from the wolf's bloody mouth hit them in the face. The orc cavalry howled and rushed into the crowd in front of them. Hearing the cries and shouts, George turned his head and looked at his sister who was holding a child not far away. Without hesitation, he clenched his weapon and rushed up. Behind him were the old, weak, women and children. Once the wolf cavalry rushed in, it would be a massacre. As a trained militia, he could not sit back and watch the tragedy happen. "Come with me. Men, stay and block them." George waved his weapon and went up. Several men with children around him also clenched their weapons and rushed up. There was fear in these people's eyes because they were facing a terrifying Mount Wolf cavalry. Not to mention the orc warriors above, even the Mount Wolves below were not something they could easily deal with. These ferocious beasts were the leaders of the wolf pack. The wolf that was bigger than a calf could easily deal with a real warrior. It was difficult for them, who had only received militia training, to defeat it. The ferocious smile of the orc appeared in front of them. The wolf just pounced and knocked over the man next to it. Then the crisp sound of bones breaking was heard. The wolf's bloody mouth bit off his throat. Fear was spreading. The crushing strength and the shadow of death made many people fearful. But no matter how scared they were, no one retreated in the end. Because they had no way to retreat. Behind them were a group of old, weak, women and children. Their relatives were among them. As men, they had to stand up, even if they knew they would die. But even if they died, they had to fight to the last moment. Awoo! The mournful howls of the wolves reverberated in the air. The wolf cavalry was like a torrent that broke through the defensive formation in front of them. These ordinary militia could not stop them at all. In just the moment of collision, more than 10 militia fell to the ground. A wolf rider crossed their line of defense. The killing had awakened the bloodthirsty nature of the orcs. It rushed directly to a woman who was running away. Because she was carrying a child, she was too slow, so the wolf rider easily caught up with her. Sharp blades cut through the air. Facing the terrible enemy, the woman, who had no fighting experience, squatted down at the moment of contact. Her mother's instinct made her tightly protect the child, exposing her defenseless back to the enemy. A head flew into the air. The blood gushing out was accompanied by the mournful cries of the children. The half-orc cavalry laughed and waved their swords again. They had no sympathy for the alien races. Their bloodthirsty nature made them brave warriors, and such warriors were ruthless on the battlefield. The harsh living environment made them believe in natural selection. The weak could only be eliminated, even their own kind. The cold light appeared once again. It wasn't the first time they had slashed their swords at the crying children in front of them. As relatively stupid half-orcs, they also had a smart side, which was that the children of their enemies would become their new enemies when they grew up. The smell of blood filled the air. Sharp blades slashed through the air, and a massacre seemed to be about to take place. Swoosh! A sharp arrow flew out. The body of the half-orc cavalry stiffened for a moment, and then he fell off the wolf. The sharp arrow shot directly into its head, penetrating its skull in an instant. With a plop sound, the second arrow shot out, hitting the wolf's head in an instant, nailing it to the ground. Terrible strength. There seemed to be someone approaching in the darkness, and the speed was quite fast. Behind him, more figures appeared. Cold swords appeared. The wolf cavalry close to the crowd was instantly killed by the flying shadows. Their ferocious heads fell to the ground one by one. Even the ferocious wolves couldn't hold on for more than a second. Roar! Accompanied by a dull roar, a huge figure rushed out from the darkness. He was wearing heavy armor, and his eyes were bloodshot as he roared in excitement. Blood vessels that looked like earthworms appeared on his explosive muscles. This was a 3-meter-tall warrior. He seemed to be heavy, but his charging speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he rushed to the front of a wolf cavalry. Then he roared and swung the heavy anchor in his hand. The terrible power erupted with a dull roar. The wolf was directly smashed into meat paste with the half-orc cavalry on it. The half-orcs are just so. The giant glanced at the frightened half-elves beside him, and a sinister smile appeared on his scarred mouth. Then, he rushed up again. His huge body swung the heavy anchor as if he was entering and exiting a place where there was no one. Not a single wolf rider could withstand his attack. Often, they would be smashed into a meat patty together with their wolves. Giant. The pirate leader under Soren. He wasn't very smart, but he was quite good as a fighter. He should be the pirate leader under Soren who was the closest to the legendary level. His lack of intelligence didn't affect Soren's use of him. With the blood of the swamp giant and the warrior's job as a barbarian, this guy with all brawn and no brain would rush to the front in any battle. Often, he would break the enemy's defense line alone. Don't waste time. Scarface stabbed his sword into the wolf's throat. He turned to look at the giant next to him and said in a deep voice, "There are enemies approaching. They can't hold on for much longer. You go and help them deal with the half-orc army." A figure quickly approached in the darkness. Soren's elite pirates finally arrived. The wolf cavalry fell one by one. When they saw that something was wrong, they immediately tried to escape, but they were killed by arrows one by one. The giant roared and rushed up. Berserk! After his huge body approached the half-orc army, he didn't stop at all. He directly waved the anchor and rushed into the army from the side of the temple warriors. This time, the orc army was thrown off their feet. Giant! You idiot! Scarface was so anxious that he stomped his feet. Helpless, he could only speed up and rush over. This idiot! I let you support the temple warriors behind, not let you rush into the half-orc army alone. Scarface cursed in his heart, but at this time, he could only brace himself and go forward. Bang! With a shrill scream, the half-orc warrior's body was directly smashed out, and then he hit 7 or 8 people in a row, and then he fell to the ground and died. The giant relied on his full body armor. His strength was higher than Soren's in the state of transformation. Coupled with the giant's body advantage, he simply crushed all the half-orcs. The anchor used by a large warship was a complete killing machine on the battlefield. The half-orcs, who were known for their strength, were like a group of children in front of him. The heavy anchor roared past. The giant seemed to feel that this was not enough, so he directly threw the huge anchor in his hand. This time, it was simply flesh and blood flying. The heavy anchor whistled past like a shadow, and it forcibly cleared a bloody line in the middle of the half-orc army. The more the giant killed, the more satisfied he became. The battle on land was much larger than the battle on the deck. He directly picked up the anchor again, and then swung it 360 degrees. In an instant, a vacuum area was cleared around him. Giant creatures were indeed a great killing machine on the battlefield. Just him alone seriously damaged the morale of the half-orcs. His huge body and huge weapon formed a complete crushing advantage, and in an instant, the half-orc army was disrupted. In the darkness, sharp arrows were shot out like a storm. Soren calmly put an arrow on the bow, and every arrow took the life of an enemy. His figure moved at high speed in the night. As long as a target suspected of being an half-orc officer appeared, it would be greeted with a fatal arrow. The elven war bow could penetrate armor within a range of 300 meters. Soren's dark vision allowed him to be unaffected by the night. He was like a ghost wandering on the battlefield, calmly but fatally killing any dangerous targets. No one could hide from his sight, and no one could avoid his arrows. After all, he had the blood of a half-elf. Chapter 476. Am I saved? George awkwardly pushed away the wolf that was on top of him and staggered to his feet. Cough. He coughed violently and felt weak all over. He seemed to have suffered a little internal injury. However, his battle record was also quite brilliant. As an ordinary person who had only received militia training, he actually killed a wolf alone. The battle in front was still going on, but more and more reinforcements appeared in the darkness. These were fierce-looking warriors. They had a stronger murderous aura than the regular army of Autumnfall. At first glance, they were elites who had experienced many desperate battles. The reinforcements finally arrived. Facing the ferocious orc army in front of them, the pirates under Soren's command were fearless. They even rushed up while screaming. Sir Soren was invincible. Victory after victory gave them the courage to face any enemy. Even if it was an abyssal demon in front of them, they would have the courage to face it head-on. Men should fight the enemy head-on. The high-spirited elite pirates directly divided into two teams and surrounded the enemy from both sides, ready to swallow the enemy in front of them in one breath. Why did they have to fight the orcs? Why did they think so much? Anyway, this was Soren's order. They just had to kill the orcs that were still standing in front of them. Demigod Domain, Pirate. Facing the elite pirates who finally arrived at the rear, a smile finally appeared at the corner of Soren's mouth. Then he looked at the orc army in front with cold eyes and did not hesitate to open Pirate Domain. An invisible divine domain spread out. In an instant, all the pirates seemed to have gone crazy. Their morale was so high that it was about to explode. If it was said that they were excited before, now it was a wailing and howling. Each of them seemed to be possessed by the god of war. All kinds of combat skills were used to kill a large number of enemies in an instant, and directly divided the orc army into two from the middle. Ugly Monkey's current state was very strange. He did not know what happened to him. Suddenly, his whole body seemed to have endless strength, and his whole person was very excited. His pupils were slightly red, and his heart was beating much faster than before. His entire body was in a very strange state. Regardless of whether it was his hearing, sight, touch, or perception, all of them had reached unprecedented heights due to some kind of invisible force. Behind him were the corpses of half-orcs. Without exception, they were all killed in one blow. The ugly monkey felt as if it had been possessed by the soul of an assassin. The enemy's movements, positions, and flaws were all within his grasp. His excitement did not affect his rationality. Instead, it allowed him to unleash 120% of his strength. Around him, his companions seemed to be in a similar state. Each of them seemed to have been injected with chicken blood as they performed exceptionally well. Increased morale. The morale boost was equivalent to a level 6 spell, and the domain effect was similar to the greater bravery spell. The effect it would have on the battlefield was simply unimaginable. The elite pirates that rushed over flattened the half-orc army in front of them. At the end of the battle, it was almost a one-sided situation. The fighting spirit of the orc army was easily destroyed. Soren put away his elven warbow. Almost all of the orc officers were killed by him. If a demigod were to kill them personally, these guys would have no way to survive. Your Excellency. Scarface's figure appeared behind Soren. He knelt on one knee and said, "The orc army has been completely defeated? Do you want to kill them?" Soren turned around and glanced at him, then said in a deep voice, "Don't worry about them. Arrange for people to evacuate the civilians immediately. The real enemy is approaching. Let people cover the civilians' retreat. We will return to the range of the warship's cannons." Scarface nodded and said, "Yes. Soon." Someone arranged for the civilians to evacuate, and Soren looked into the distance. He felt that more enemies were approaching, and among them, there was an existence that he was quite afraid of. Eugene the Ascendant. Some unusually agile shadows were flying in the darkness. Soren's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he said coldly, "They're fast." A woo. A mournful wolf howl sounded. However, it was not a wolf that appeared, but a group of burly gnolls with black hair. Abyss gnolls. The servants of the Gnoll King, Yeenagu. Black shadows flew past the periphery of the battlefield, but they did not rush over recklessly. Instead, they stayed far behind them. These gnolls were very smart. They knew that they could not defeat so many enemies. Die. A trace of killing intent appeared in Soren's eyes. He waved to the pirate leader beside him and disappeared into the shadows. Abyss gnolls. These monsters were dangerous. He had to get rid of them first. On the other side, the mighty orc army was approaching. A very tall giant gnoll with green eyes stood beside Eugene. It held a three-headed flail in its hand. At this moment, its expression was very crazy. It roared, "We can't let these mortals go. You said that the parts of the divine artifact, Flail of Time, are in the hands of the half-elf church. That's the divine artifact that belongs to our Lord. We can't let these mortals take it away. Otherwise, your tribe will suffer the wrath of our Lord." Eugene's eyes were cold. She silently looked at the crazy gnoll leader in front of her and said in a deep voice, "I will definitely do what I promised. The parts of the divine artifact will definitely be handed over to your Lord." Hee hee. The huge gnoll leader looked at Eugene with a cold and cruel expression. A cruel smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He slowly said, "It better be so. In order to help you deal with the half-elves, many gnoll warriors have died in battle. If you still can't get the divine artifact, our Lord will definitely make you pay. His wrath is not something you can bear." Eugene was silent. As the demon lord who ruled the bottomless abyss, the strength of the Gnoll King was indeed not something that a mortal could resist. Not to mention that the Gnoll King had also conquered the Ghoul King, which was equivalent to facing the crazy revenge of two abyss lords at the same time. The orc tribe could not bear such a heavy price. They had to get the parts of the divine artifact. Speed up. With Eugene's low roar, the orc army suddenly sped up a lot and rushed forward. Eugene's gaze looked into the distance. The power of the ancestor's soul made her sense a powerful and dangerous existence, which made her feel a little uneasy. The god of the half-elves, Soren. This unfamiliar name made her feel deeply afraid. She had a hunch that a war was inevitable. We must get it back. Eugene clenched her fists silently. The gnolls were suspicious and fickle by nature. If the divine artifact was really gone, these ferocious beasts would definitely turn their backs on her. Blood. Drop by drop, it fell. Soren's figure was hazy in the shadows. In front of him were the corpses of the gnolls lying on the ground. He looked at the corpses in front of him coldly. He directly reached out and picked up the tallest one of them. He frowned and carefully observed it. Abyss demon. Soren's expression was dignified. He murmured, "Not a gnoll from the material plane. Demon." There were two modes of reproduction in the bottomless abyss. One was the continuous evolution of the abyss worm. The demon's bloodline could mutate, and eventually evolve into various creatures. The second was demon reproduction and demon hybridization. The demons that evolved from the abyss worm mated with the same kind of demons, or with other kinds of demons, and eventually produced new demons. There were also some outsiders in the bottomless abyss. But in the end, they would more or less be mixed with the blood of the demons, so the abyss species were very different from other species. Hybrid demon. Soren threw away the corpse in front of him and whispered, "It seems that there is a loophole in the barrier of the plane. Otherwise, the Gnoll King, Yeenagu, would not have sent so many gnolls from the abyss to the material plane. It should not be long before the invasion of the demons." The gnolls from the abyss appeared during the siege, and now there were so many of them. A small number of them could be explained by other reasons. But with so many of them, Soren was almost certain that the other party must have the passage from the bottomless abyss to the material plane. Demon Lord. Soren looked into the distance with a dignified face. Perhaps Eugene, the ascendant, was not afraid of him in the form of the slaughter. But if the Knoll King, Yeenagud, joined the fight, he had almost no chance of winning. Not to mention that the Knoll King had also conquered the Ghoul King. Now he only hoped that the Demon Lord did not appear in the material plane. After all, the bottomless abyss was their headquarters. If he appeared, I reckon that there will be many demon lords who can't wait to overturn his lair, right? After all, this guy had always regarded the succubus queen, Mechanat, as an enemy, and from time to time, he would harass and attack her. The Knoll King, Yeenagud, was a master at courting death. He not only regarded the succubus queen, Mechanat, as an enemy, but also launched many attacks. At the same time, he was also a mortal enemy of the Tauren King, Buffett. The two sides had fought many times. But under such circumstances, he was still able to conquer the Ghoul King and successfully expand his territory. He didn't know if this guy was too lucky, or he was really not simple. Soren would not underestimate any living Abyss Lord. If they were dead, then so be it. Under the night sky, the orc army was speeding up. Eugene's figure suddenly stopped and looked in a certain direction. In an instant, he reached out and grabbed the white bone spear behind him. A fierce murderous aura emerged. Eugene's whole body was like a taut bow, ready to fight at any time. Someone was watching them in the dark. The enemy did not approach. He observed them in the dark and then disappeared into the night again. Chapter 477. Closer, closer, they were already very close. The night wind that blew in their faces seemed to carry moisture. They could hear the sound of flowing river ahead. After passing through a sparse forest, the scene before them appeared before the eyes of the exhausted refugees. Many of them had never seen such a large ship in their entire lives. In the Agate River, they could only see medium-sized ships at most. Such a large ship could only be used in the vast and boundless sea. The black cannons were aimed at the land, and the soldiers on the ships were ready to go. There were torches on all sides. They couldn't see how many ships there were, but there were probably more than 100 of them. In their field of vision, the entire river was filled with large ships. There was a faint fog surrounding the area, and a certain location seemed to be shrouded in fog. No one could see what was inside the fog in the dark, but it seemed like a dangerous monster, quietly watching everything in front of it, waiting for its master's call. Fortunately, the Agate River was as wide as the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers. Otherwise, Soren's fleet wouldn't be able to sail in. Quiet. A gentle female voice sounded. It was like a spring breeze blowing into everyone's ears. Then, everyone quieted down. They didn't know why, but when they heard the gentle female voice, they couldn't help but calm down. They had just gone through a brutal battle. Even though they were still panicking, they couldn't help but calm down when they heard the gentle female voice. The Saint Priest Milan raised her head and looked in front of her. She saw a tall woman with a veil over her face. She had a very familiar aura. It was the power of divinity bestowed by the Lord. However, the woman was much stronger than her. Milan walked in front of the woman and gently twirled her skirt. She bowed her head and expressed her respect to the woman in front of her. High Priestess. The veiled woman smiled and nodded. The priests of the other churches looked at each other and hurriedly bowed their heads to show their respect. Although they still didn't know who the masked woman in front of them was, they could tell that she wasn't an ordinary person since her words had calmed everyone down. Let the women and children board the ship first. The veiled woman glanced at the people in front of her and slowly ordered. The men stay here and prepare. There is enough food on the shore. Let them share it with the others. Sixth Fleet, prepare for battle. The enemy may catch up to us at any time. Send the civilians to the cabin and equip the militia with weapons after they have eaten. The gentle voice seemed to have a magical power. The crowd in front of her actually automatically separated according to her orders. Then, the women and children were sent to the deck one by one and placed in the cabins of the battleship. There were basically no old people among these fleeing civilians. It was very difficult for old people to survive in the chaos of war. Most of them were women and children, and then there were the militia who believed in the half-elf god. During the siege, all the adult males were conscripted. Even the teenage boys were forced to learn some combat skills. Tell the pirates not to harass these civilians. The masked woman turned around and looked at the pirate leader behind her. She said coldly, "These are all believers of my lord. You should know how Sir Soren deals with people who break the rules." The pirate leader, who was missing his left ear, revealed a sinister smile and nodded, "Don't worry, Your Excellency. If anyone dares to mess around, I'll skin them myself." Cruel means of ruling. Soren's rule on the south coast was maintained by killing and order. Only those who had a brain problem knew what would happen if they disobeyed Sir Soren's orders. Sir Soren killed without blinking an eye. Steaming hot food was distributed. Some of it was prepared in advance, and the other part was dried meat and salted fish. There was plenty of meat in the prepared food. Most of it was fish in the sea. At this time, it was very satisfying to be able to fill one's stomach. Now that they could eat meat, many people felt a sense of happiness in their hearts. Even in peaceful times, as civilians, they could add some meat during festivals. From what they saw in front of them, the food prepared by the reinforcements was very abundant. Meat accounted for a large proportion of the food. It seemed that the Lord's forces were really powerful. At least they were very rich. The old bishop and the priests next to him looked at each other. At this time, they didn't care about their manners. They took a bowl of hot soup and wolfed it down with dried meat and salted fish. Autumn fall had been besieged for a long time. There was not much food in the city, and some of it had to be distributed to a large number of refugees. Even the high-ranking priests could barely fill their stomachs during this time. Eat meat? If they let go of the moral taboo in their hearts, maybe there was a lot of meat in autumn fall. There were sounds of wolfing down food everywhere. At this time, there should be a trace of chaos because of hunger and panic, but they didn't know why. When the voice of the masked woman sounded, everyone's heart was calm. They quietly and orderly received the food, and then, after filling their stomachs, they were ready for battle. When they were full, they naturally had strength. The arrival of the reinforcements had obviously restored the morale of the temple guards. The foundation of a church was definitely not simple. Many of the surviving priests were close to high grade. After the first round of siege, most of the surviving temple guards were grade 3 professions. Among them, there were many special advanced guardian knights. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to hold on for so long against the beastmen army that was 10 times their size. Praise the Lord! Praise the Lord! Praise the Lord! A burst of praise and prayer sounded. When the fire of hope was reignited, many people could not help but kneel on the ground devoutly to pray and praise. The masked woman smiled and looked at everything in front of her. She seemed to be the center of everything. When anyone's eyes fell on her, their hearts could not help but feel a soft breeze. Soon, everyone boarded the warship, and the elite pirates appeared in front of them. The priests and temple guards boarded the deck, and the civilians were placed in the cabin. The whole process was quite orderly, and there was not the slightest panic from beginning to end. Soren's figure appeared in the night. He looked at the masked woman in front of him and smiled. Then he said seriously, "Get ready to fight. Load the ammunition. The orc army is catching up." Eugene rushed over quickly. The orc warriors had a clear advantage in physical strength compared to humans. When all the civilians were placed in the cabin, the mighty orc army also appeared in the sight of the lookout. Damn! OL, Sea Dog stood on the lookout with a monocular and murmured, "So many enemies. If they dare to rush up, how many will we kill with one shot?" They were pirates. Although the coastal areas were also restricted by the church, the control of alchemy weapons was not so strict. Almost every warship had cannons. Although they used solid shells, their lethality was still very high against ordinary soldiers. The disaster brought by the Arcane Empire made many church forces strictly control alchemy, but there were not so many restrictions in the areas where pirates were active. Soren's artillery power should be counted on one's fingers in the entire material plane. If it was a naval battle, perhaps the lethality would not be much. But if it was a densely packed battle on land, one shot could really clear a path of blood. Come come come. Scarface came out with a grin. His left arm was injured by an orc blade master. Fortunately, the orc blade master had just advanced, and he carefully prepared a poison crossbow, the poison used by the natives. Otherwise, he would have been killed by the enemy. There was actually a half-beast man's sword saint hidden in the formation. Scarface, who had almost been killed by the half-beast man's sword saint, grinned as he took out 2 iron balls that were chained together. He then personally put them into the barrel of the cannon and said with a strange smile, "Put this in. It will be fun to shoot with this shell." The enemies were getting closer and closer. Because they were busy sending the civilians to the ships, the pirates certainly did not have the time to retreat. So after Soren's order was given, the giant immediately led the elite pirates to form a formation on the river, and then waited for the enemy to rush over. It was fine if they did not dare to come. If they dared to come, these hundreds of cannons would definitely teach them a lesson. Eugene stopped in his tracks. He looked at the warships in front of him, and his face became quite ugly. Pirates. He had traveled around the continent before, so it was impossible for him not to have an impression of pirate warships. Although there were no pirate flags on the warships, he could recognize that the enemies were all pirates at a glance. Cannons after cannons. Although Eugene himself scoffed at this inferior alchemy weapon and did not put it in his eyes at all, he was also very clear about the damage this weapon could do to ordinary soldiers. Its clumsy body and slow firing speed were simply a piece of scrap iron in many battles, but in this situation where the army was fighting, their lethality was quite amazing. Autumnfall also had cannons. But the half-elves were proud of their excellent archers. The dozens of cannons on the city gate were simply decorations. They were not at the same level as the black muzzles in front of them. Cannons were standard equipment for pirates. Whether it was the skills of the gunners, the number of cannons, or the power of the artillery, the coastal areas were not comparable to the inland areas. If they forced an attack, they would probably have to withstand a round of cannon fire. Note, the Droll Church hates alchemy. They believe that it is they who destroy the harmony of nature. The wounds left by nature cannot be healed for thousands of years. It is a disaster brought by the alchemy research of the Arcane Empire. Therefore, any place where the Droll Church is active, the degree of alchemy control is very strict. Chapter 478. It's just some scrap metal. The giant gnoll leader frowned and glanced at Eugene next to him, and said in a deep voice, "I feel that the artifact my lord needs is nearby. We can't let them take it away. Eugene, hurry up and order the attack." Eugene's mouth twitched slightly, and his face was not very good. The gnolls from the abyss had more than 20 points in agility. Unless they were lucky, it was impossible to hit them. From loading to firing, this level of craftsmanship posed little threat to the gnolls from the abyss. Otherwise, the main fighting force of the abyss would not rely on high-grade demons. However, these cannons weren't the same for the other orc warriors. If they rushed in like this, they would be hit by at least one round of cannons. Their dense formation suffered a lot of damage from the cannons. But the current situation was that they had to go. If they couldn't find the parts of the artifact, Flail of Time, the gnoll army might turn against them. If the alliance was broken, the gnolls from the abyss would regard the orcs as enemies, and then crazy revenge attacks were likely to happen. In that case, it would be difficult to completely defeat the half-elves. The demons of the abyss were chaotic and evil. Since ancient times, chaos had either produced lunatics or idiots. Eugene was not sure what terrible things these lunatics would do if he did not meet their requirements. There. The giant gnoll leader with black hair suddenly pointed to the front. Its green eyes seemed to see through the darkness, and its sight was directly locked on a little girl wearing a small white priest robe under the night sky. It growled, "There. The artifact part my lord needs is in the hands of that hateful little girl. Milan." Saint Priest, Milan. The little girl did not realize the approaching danger at the moment. She was just glad that they were finally rescued. My lord's reinforcements had successfully rescued them. After boarding the warship, the women and children were much safer. Eugene recognized the little girl in the white priest robe at first glance. After all, the siege of the city that day was so memorable. In the end, it was this little girl who made all his plans fail. The orc army suffered heavy losses under the dragon breath of the three dragons. A strong killing intent appeared on Eugene's old face. New hatred and old hatred gathered together. He couldn't help but clench the bone spear on his back. It was true that it was a great chief worthy of respect, love, and compassion, but it only cared about its own people. King of the Gnolls, Yeenagu. This evil, bloody, chaotic, murderous, and crazy demon lord. No matter how evil, bloodthirsty, and crazy he was in the eyes of others, his reputation among the Gnolls was as high as the sun in the sky. It could be said that most of the Gnolls in the multiverse respected him, and quite a number of them worshipped him crazily. The reason was simple. Over the past thousands of years, Yeenagu, the king of Gnolls, had done everything, whether it was launching a battle against the Lord of the Abyss, or trying his best to conquer the king of ghouls, or carrying out other evil schemes. There was only one ultimate goal. Yeenagu, the king of Gnolls, had always wanted to see the Gnolls grow stronger. He had been working hard all his life for this goal. From the perspective of the Gnolls, Yeenagu should be a great leader. Eugene was similar. That was why it had such a high reputation among the half-blood beast men, but the other races only had hatred and enmity towards it. The two were actually the same kind of people, otherwise, they would not have come together. Charge! With an angry roar, the orc army in front of them rushed over like a tide. The elite pirates on the riverbank had already been on standby. Behind them was the Agate River. The pirates who were familiar with water could easily jump into the river and then find a way to board the ship. The warships parked on the Agate River were fortresses. The orc army's fighting ability on land was indeed strong, but if they dared to come to the water, the pirates had enough confidence to teach them a lesson. The ground seemed to tremble. In the face of such a battle scene today, the elite pirates did not show the slightest panic on their faces. Battles had already trained them. In the fiercely competitive killing industry of pirates, unqualified candidates would only be eliminated. The orc army surged like a tide. Their physical fitness was really good. They could launch an impulsive battle directly after a rapid march. But that was all. When the enemy entered the range of the cannons, a storm of firepower poured out. Fire! 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 Bursts of muffled gunfire sounded, and the orc warriors at the front fell like wheat being harvested. Solid ammunition might not have enough killing area, but it was still too terrifying to deal with flesh and blood. Especially the chain cannons fired by some cannons, which swept across in an instant, leaving broken limbs all over the ground. The pirates' cannon fire was like a bloody and cruel symphony. Round after round of frenzied firing followed by the rhythm of the rising and falling of the cannon fire. Three-stage shooting. Eugene had never seen it before, but it was very common for Soren. The warships on the Agate River had already formed a crisscrossing firepower net. If it was just a normal battle command, Soren would not be able to do it to this extent. Because it was too difficult to command in a real battle. But today was a little different. Soren had a powerful psionic warlock standing beside him. Long before the orc army arrived, she had already set up a psionic force field, so she could transmit Soren's orders to every warship's commander at any time. Her voice sounded in the mind of the warship's commander at the same time as Soren's orders. Compared to this kind of battle command that transcended time, Soren's previous method of relying on the pirate flag to transmit orders was simply too weak. It was not at the same level at all. No. There was no way to compare at all. If the current situation could be described with a metaphor, it would be the combat ability of the Renaissance era, but equipped with the combat command system of the Interstellar era. This feeling was too good, wasn't it? Soren never thought that it would be so easy to command the pirates in battle. In the past, he relied on the pirate flag to slowly give orders, and then waited for the opposing commander to see the flag before taking action. This was simply a ruthless destruction of his intelligence. But now, relying on the psionic warlock's psionic communication, the efficiency of battle command was completely different. The orc army was in a daze. Because at this moment, in their minds, the enemy's cannons did not stop from the beginning to the end. The warriors of the Blade clan who rushed in front fell in batches like wheat being cut down. They did not even rush in front of the enemy, and they suffered heavy losses under the baptism of cannon fire. Fear spread. The ground was full of broken limbs and wailing orc warriors. For them who worshipped brute force, Soren taught them a good lesson today, telling them that muscles could not solve all problems. Boom! 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 The sound of cannon fire drowned the orc army. Night made it difficult for them to see how many cannons the enemy had. They could only hear the roar of the cannons from beginning to end. The dull noise covered the roar of the orc officers. After the first round of charge was directly killed by the cannons, the orc warriors who rushed at the front collapsed without any accident. They were just a group of mortals with flesh and blood. Soren looked at the battlefield in front of him and shook his head gently. Dealing with these ignorant orcs, he had an obvious feeling of IQ suppression. If these guys were not born with amazing brute force, maybe the plan would have gone better. But the current situation was enough. Soren saved the first batch of the most devout believers. After sending them to a safe place, he planned to transport a few more batches of believers. Population. What Mordor lacked the most was population. 20 or 30,000 half-elves could be transported back. Soren began to stockpile food and supplies so early in order to deal with today's situation. He was not afraid of a large population. Mordor was under rapid construction planning. Soren would only worry about the lack of labor, not too much labor. Swoosh. Swoosh. Some fast-moving figures suddenly appeared in the night. The orc army that attracted the firepower at the beginning was just cannon fodder. These abyss gnolls that came in the night were the main force. An old figure flew over at an astonishing speed. Hundreds of lurking abyss gnolls rushed out from all directions, but their target was not Soren, nor the elite pirates on the river bank, but Milan, who was standing in the middle of the priests. Eugene rushed directly to the little girl in front of him. With a roar, he clenched his white bone spear and threw it out. He actually wanted to nail her to the ground on the spot. It all happened too fast. The sudden attack of the abyss gnolls attracted everyone's attention, and then the next moment, the legendary war shaman with a profession level of 27 rushed over. He wanted to kill the saint priest in front of him, Milan. A poor little girl who lost her father in the war, lost all her relatives, and lived alone in the world, less than 15 years old. Just because she had something in her hand that he had to get. The shadow of death loomed over her. Facing, Ascendant, Eugene's all-out attack, Milan's chances of surviving were close to zero. On the whole battlefield, almost no one could take the thunderous blow of this legendary war shaman, and at this moment, under the shadow of death, only one person could save her. Soren. His figure disappeared at the moment when the white bone spear broke through the air. Chapter 479. Shadow Leap. Soren's figure instantly disappeared from where he stood. He crossed a distance of nearly 100 meters and directly appeared behind the divine priest Milan. He then pushed the little girl in front of him away and disappeared again at the same time. Fortunately, the distance of Shadow Leap was increased to 200 meters. Otherwise, Soren would not be able to save the little girl in front of him in time. Boom! The ground trembled. The spear thrown by the war shaman was like an anti-aircraft gun. It actually shattered the ground by more than 10 meters in an instant. If it really hit, Soren would probably be pierced through. Soren was not very clear about the advanced profession of war shaman, but with his rich combat experience and knowledge, he could roughly judge that war shaman was a special profession similar to Storm Lord. The Storm Lord was a special legendary profession that was advanced by the priests of the god of storms, while the War Shaman was an advanced legendary profession that was advanced by the shaman priests of the totem faith. These special advanced professions might not have very strong spellcasting abilities, but their melee combat abilities were quite terrifying. After all, not many cleric classes were fragile. Very strong burst power. Soren turned his head to look at the little girl. After making sure that she was not injured, he turned his attention back to the War Shaman Eugene in the distance. The spear thrown by the War Shaman just now made Soren's heart skip a beat. He thought to himself, looks like he also specializes in spears and javelins. His attack just now was very similar to the Storm Lord. I'm afraid that the War Shaman is also a violent advanced profession like the Storm Lord. Soren had seen the Storm Lord in battle before. The bone spear used by Eugene was very similar to the Storm Lord's attack. The Storm Lord was a violent legendary advanced profession, so Soren could roughly judge Eugene's fighting style in an instant. They had a very strong hand-to-hand combat ability, and at the same time, retained the ability to cast divine spells. Although this kind of spell-casting ability was not as good as a pure shaman's, in a real battle, the effect of their combat strength was one-sided. His attack had missed. Eugene gasped for breath, but his expression didn't change at all. He lowered his head and knelt on the ground with one knee. He pressed his rough palm on the ground and said in a deep voice, "Ancestor's soul. Even the earth is trembling. Eternal heroic spirit. My race is undying." The deep and ancient language of the orcs echoed in the air. As Eugene slammed the ground, something strange happened behind Soren. Buzz. After Eugene's attack, the white bone spear that was buried in the ground suddenly trembled. Then, it was pulled out from the ground in an instant. A half-transparent half-solid figure appeared beside the white bone spear. It roared and held the white bone spear with both hands, thrusting it towards Soren's back. A whistling gust of wind attacked. The white bone spear was like a bolt of white lightning that pierced through the air. Even with Soren's speed, it was difficult for him to dodge it. Shadow leap. Soren's figure instantly moved 10 meters horizontally. The half-illusory, half-real spirit did not hit Soren. With a roar, he waved his white bone spear. In an instant, a terrible force broke out and directly swept the figures of 7 or 8 priests nearby, causing them to vomit blood and fly backward. "Everyone, back off." Soren's expression was quite serious. He roared, "Stop those gnolls. Don't come near here." An angel from another world? A saint apostle? Or should it be called a heroic spirit? Divine Ascender, Eugene had indeed touched the realm of the gods. The half-spirit creature standing in front of Soren obviously came from another world. Even if it wasn't a saint apostle, it was a half-orc heroic spirit that had died in battle. In a situation where no one in the half-orc race had ascended to godhood, Eugene could still summon the heroic spirit of their ancestors. This meant that it had touched the realm of the gods and had a very high compatibility with the half-orc's ancestral spirit in the Grey Waste. Roar. With an angry roar, the heroic spirit instantly rushed toward Soren again. This kind of heroic spirit was born with legendary strength. Many of them were famous in the mortal world when they were alive. The heroic spirit that Eugene summoned was at least level 24. The situation was not good. When the heroic spirit was summoned, Eugene immediately continued to rush forward. Its target was still the Saint Priest Milan in front of it. Soren didn't know why Eugene hated the little girl in front of him so much that it wanted to kill her. She couldn't die. Saint Priest Milan couldn't die. Soren's pupils turned blood red in an instant. For Eugene's blatant attempt to kill his first Saint Cardinal, Soren's heart was filled with anger and killing intent. He activated the slaughter form in an instant, and his figure directly rushed out toward Eugene. Elemental Legion. When Soren's figure flew out and was ready to stop Eugene, a portal connected to the elemental plane was opened. A scorching aura spread. The appearance of the Elder Fire Elemental's huge body made the surrounding temperature rise sharply in an instant. The ground was scorched black, and everything within a radius of 100 or 200 meters was illuminated. The whistling of the wind sounded. The giant wind elemental followed the figure of the elder fire elemental. The next moment, it flew into the air and directly rolled up an abyss knoll that was rushing toward Milan and threw it into the sky. Finally, there were heavy footsteps. The giant earth elemental slowly walked out, raised its millstone-sized fist, and smashed it toward the heroic spirit in front of it. The portal gradually closed. A legendary elder fire elemental and two giant elementals with a monster level of around 18. Soren's figure was shrouded in an evil aura. This was the first time he had transformed into his slaughter form after killing the mutated demon. When he activated this ability, some unknown changes also occurred. Demonization. There was a very obvious demonic aura on Soren's body. It was the divine power belonging to a high-grade demon. A row of data appeared in front of him, transform into slaughter form. Unknown changes have occurred in slaughter form. Ability to transform into slaughter form has been improved. Divine power fused with the slaughter transformation effect. Under the transformation of the slaughterer, your attributes have been comprehensively improved. Strength +7, agility +3, physique +3, wisdom +3, combat ability is equivalent to a warrior of the same level, resistance to any abnormal status increases by 15 points. Under the slaughter form, you have an additional ability, slaughter will, and an additional ability, slaughter instinct. Divine power combined. In the state of slaughterer, automatically activated the effect of aura of fear. Any enemy within 100 meters of you must be forced to undergo a test of fear. The difficulty of the test is determined by your own divine value. If the test fails, the enemy will suffer the same effect as fear. Desire to slaughter has undergone an unknown change. Ordinary things will not be able to satisfy the desire to slaughter. The number of enemies that satisfy the desire to slaughter has been recalculated. Currently, kill at least one legendary enemy, otherwise, you will fall into a state of madness. An evil aura of fear spread out. All the gnolls within 100 meters of Soren trembled, and some even howled in fear, turned around and fled into the night. Divinity of fear. After killing the mutated demon, Soren's slaughter form seemed to have undergone an unknown change. The power of divinity of fear was also integrated into it, and he directly mastered the aura of fear that only high-grade demons could have. No. Aura of fear should be said to be a special power that only some existences close to the level of the Abyss Lord could master. All attributes were enhanced. All attributes increased by +1 under the slaughter form, and at the same time, he also mastered the ability, slaughter instinct, that only mutated demons could have. This was a special ability. Its effect was similar to battle instinct, but it was more powerful. Roar. Eugene wanted to kill the Saint Cardinal Milan in front of him, which was a slap in the face in front of Soren. Even with Soren's temper, he was enraged by the enemy at this moment. He let out an angry roar, and his figure directly broke through the air, turning into a black shadow and pouncing on the enemy in front of him. The curved sword icing death was like a meteor across the sky, and a strange cold light automatically appeared. For a moment, it seemed that even the space was about to be broken, and it slashed towards Eugene's head on the spot. Clang. A dull thud echoed in the air. Another spear appeared in Eugene's palm. It was a grayish-black spear that seemed to be made of bone, but when it fought, it was like metal. A huge burst of power. At the position where the two of them fought, an invisible wave of air spread out. Heroic spirit immortal. My body is immortal. Eugene's old face was solemn. He clenched the spear and inserted it into the ground. In an instant, two half-illusory spirits appeared around his body. Heroic spirit war soul. He could even summon heroic spirits. The kingdom of heroic spirits where the orcs worshipped their ancestors was like a small divine kingdom built in the grey wilderness, and Eugene the Ascender was the only being in the entire orc tribe who could freely connect to this kingdom. He was not a god. But to some extent, he was also a god. Because he was dying. The powerful power of the war shaman could not greatly extend his life. Now, the old Eugene had already come to the edge of death. He only had a few years left in his life, and he had already felt the call of the ancestors' souls. A heroic spirit kingdom built in the gray wilderness. This place was calling his soul because he was qualified to enter it and become the most powerful existence. The call was equal. When death approached, he felt the call of the ancestors' souls. Eugene himself was like a god connected to the heroic spirit kingdom that the half-orc clan had worshipped for thousands of years. Because his life was coming to an end. Chapter 480. He would kill anyone who stood in his way. He would kill anyone who stood in his way. Soren, who had transformed into a slaughterer, seemed to have entered a berserk state. If he let Eugene behead his first and only Saint Cardinal in front of him, and in front of so many priests and believers, then he would not have the face to hold the throne and become a god. It would be a disgrace of his life. A stain that could never be washed away. The whole plan of becoming a god might become a joke. No. Absolutely not. Soren's figure turned into an afterimage. When his feet touched the ground, cracks appeared all over the ground. Without any reservation, Soren completely let go of his restrictions and directly burst out with all his strength. The curved sword in his hand seemed to have broken through space. After killing many powerful enemies, the legendary curved sword icing death seemed to have recovered a lot of its spirituality. It even automatically emitted a strange cold light. The moment Soren slashed the war souls, a cold frost appeared. Dang! Dang! Soren held two swords in his hands and fought against Ascendant, Eugene and two legendary war souls. Under the slaughterer state, he was still not at a disadvantage. Because his speed was too fast. Under the slaughterer state, Soren's dexterity directly exceeded 30 points. With his legendary evasion, legendary battle skills, epic dexterity, reflex evasion, intuition evasion, rolling evasion, flexible movement, and other abilities, Soren was like a ghost. Even legendary enemies would find it difficult to touch him. After a long time of training and accumulation, Soren wanted to be able to deal with such a situation one day. When facing multiple legendary enemies at the same time, he still had the power to fight. One evasion ability might be insignificant. 2 evasion abilities might not be that great. 3 evasion specialties might be just as so. But when 4, 5, 6, including the legendary level of evasion abilities were stacked together, the quantitative change would lead to a qualitative change. Even when facing the siege of several legendary enemies, he would not be at a disadvantage. At this moment, Soren felt as if he had returned to his peak. Even though there were still some flaws in some of his abilities, he had recovered at least 80% of his strength. The only difference was the legendary abilities such as Shadow Domain and Shadow Step. Spinning Slash. The cold scimitar drew a cold light. Eugene nimbly dodged Soren's attack, but the 2 legendary hero spirits beside him could not. Their bodies were slashed by Soren's sword. Every time they came into contact with the sword, cold frost would appear. The energy supply of the scimitar icing death was quite effective against these half-spirits. Arcane Missile X6. Soren's target wasn't Eugene, the Ascendant. Instead, it was a heroic soul beside him. It was unrealistic for Soren to directly kill Eugene with a burst of power. This was because a level 27 war shaman had the vitality of a legendary warrior. However, Soren was 90% sure that he could kill one of the hero souls he summoned. Shadow Leap. Sword Form, Beheading. Shadow Strike. Soren's figure disappeared in an instant. The next moment, he appeared behind the hero souls and attacked like a storm. The giant earth elemental stood in front of Milan to protect her. The legendary level fire elemental elder stopped the first heroic spirit with a white bone spear. The giant wind elemental approached at an amazing speed. With a gust of wind, it directly summoned a bolt of lightning. In an instant, it interfered with Eugene, who was beside Soren. More and more gnolls from the abyss appeared in the darkness, but the elite pirates had already reacted. Scarface rushed towards one of the gnolls. The giant roared and rushed towards one of the gnolls with a three-headed flail. This gnoll was most likely a legendary-level enemy. Among all the pirate leaders, only he, who had the blood of the swamp giant, could fight head-on. The psionic warlock remained in place. However, there was a faint light in her eyes, as if she had locked onto some figures and was waiting for the right opportunity to appear. Sword form, waist slash. Crack. With a cold light, Soren directly waved his sword and cut the hero's soul into two from the middle. The giant wind elemental, which was very troublesome, temporarily attracted Eugene's attention. Eugene wanted to kill this fly that could fly around and was very fast. The speed of the wind was naturally quite fast. The wind elemental had a natural elemental bonus. It was the only creature that could fly freely and was very fast. Soren wanted to kill a hero's soul first. Eugene naturally wanted to kill a high-grade elemental and weaken the enemy's combat power. A row of cold data appeared in front of him, killed the hero's soul. Extracting the target's soul energy. You've gained 27,000 slaughter EXP. The target is a divine creature. Extracting the target's divine power. Extraction failed. The target's body is not in the current plane. Divinity activated. Forcibly extracting the target's soul energy. Extraction successful. You've gained 3 divinity. The body of the hero's soul gradually dissipated, like the light of a firefly, and finally disappeared with the wind. At the same time, in a plain called the Grey Wilderness, there was a temple built on an empty and desolate plain. Suddenly, there was a violent fluctuation of energy. In this world that was close to the scorching hell, there was suddenly a very slight fluctuation of energy. The power of the law that belonged to the gods directly broke through the space and instantly fell into a temple that had been worshipped for a long time. Crack. There was a shattering sound in the ancient temple. This power was like a lightning strike on the altar in the center of the temple, and in an instant, one of the hero's soul statues was completely shattered. The ancestral worship of the half-orcs for thousands of years. Although there were many heroic souls that could return to their ancestral land, those who were qualified to become heroic souls and set up statues on the altar of the shrine were all powerhouses who had already stepped into the legendary realm when they were alive. But now, one of the hero's soul statues was collapsing. The divine power on it was dissipating, and the fluctuation of the soul was gradually disappearing. Finally, the whole statue collapsed, and countless pieces of stone scattered on the ground. Nothing was left on it. It fell. One of the hero's souls had fallen. They should be similar to the existence of the gods from another world. Even if they died in the mortal world, they wouldn't really die. The only way to really kill them was to come to the Grey Wilderness, and kill them once, or let a god do it personally with his divine power. In a place far away from the temple. In the desolate plain, there was a huge ancient altar. In the center of the altar, there was a figure holding a skull. He silently looked into the distance and felt the power that had just broken through the space. He murmured, "A war between gods? Have the gods in the mortal world already fought? Only a battle between gods could affect other planes, and only the power of gods could cross the plane and destroy the hero's souls in the Grey Wilderness." Boom! Soren's figure flew out, and Eugene also stepped back. There was a trace of blood on the corner of his mouth. There was a slight cough. Soren's figure slowly stood up. He looked at the half-orc war shaman in front of him and once again rushed forward with his sword. However, his target wasn't Eugene, but the first hero's soul behind him who was holding a white-boned spear. The psionic warlock was ready. As a psionic warlock who once had 30 levels, even if Butterfly was cursed by the Queen of Spiders, she could still exert a powerful combat power. Boom! Seeing Soren turn around and rush toward the hero's soul, Eugene rushed forward without hesitation and instantly blocked his figure with his spear. An invisible wave of air spread out. The two sides were in a stalemate again. Soren couldn't kill Eugene, and Eugene wasn't sure that he could kill Soren. So strong. Eugene, the ascendant. Soren could only fight to a draw with Eugene in his slaughter state. This guy was indeed far stronger than other legends. Eugene's face was solemn. Or rather, his face was quite ugly at the moment. Ever since his life was coming to an end, he gradually gained the power to connect with the souls of his ancestors. However, when Soren killed a hero's soul, he suddenly lost part of his connection with the souls of his ancestors. He completely lost contact with one of the hero's souls, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't sense his existence. It was as if he had completely disappeared. Hero's soul. Under the half-orcs' ancestral worship, those who could transform into heroes' souls were all legendary figures when they were alive. There were only so many heroes' souls formed by the half-orcs' ancestral worship. They were another kind of gods, a weakened version of gods. If any of the half-orcs could become a god, these heroes' souls could be transformed into powerful god servants at any time. But now, it seemed to have disappeared. It had completely disappeared. This was a battle between gods. Perhaps Soren himself didn't realize this, but when the ascendant, Eugene summoned the heroes' souls formed by the half-orcs' ancestral worship to the material plane, and Soren personally joined the battle as the god of the half-elves. The battle between gods had already broken out. The battle between gods wouldn't change because of the weak strength of both sides. The battle between weak gods could also reach the standard of a battle between gods. And when the battle between gods broke out, whether it was petitioners, hero souls, saint apostles, or God servants, once they died in battle, they would truly fall. Chapter 481. The opportunity was right in front of him. After a short fight, Soren had a clear understanding of Eugene's strength. Shamans had various abilities similar to priests, but they specialized in elemental or soul-related divine spells. The war shaman that Eugene had evolved into obviously had the ability to summon souls. Judging from the 3 legendary heroes' souls that Eugene had summoned, it could be confirmed that the word war was referring to the half-orc heroes' souls that had died in battle. In terms of hand-to-hand combat, Eugene's strength was not much different from a legendary warrior, but his natural attributes seemed to be very high, and his long life had allowed him to master many powerful abilities. Because of his half-orc bloodline, his initial strength was definitely above 18, and he should have mastered more legendary abilities than Soren. Only a humanoid boss like Soren could fight him head-on. If it were other legendary professions, they would have been killed by the 3 legendary heroic spirits in an instant, and Eugene would not even have to do it himself. This guy was also a big boss. Just by looking at his titles, Ascendant, Dragon Slayer, King of Frost Giants Terminator, and so on, one could feel the terrible power of Eugene himself. The opportunity was fleeting. In the face of Eugene's powerful combat power, Soren did not hesitate to continue to weaken his strength and kill all the summoned heroic spirits. Gloria was not here, Vivian was not here, and neither was the fallen witch. After all, the legendary realm was a natural barrier that was difficult for mortals to cross. Although Soren had brought the psionic warlock, she was still cursed by the Queen of Spiders. The only subordinate that was closest to the legendary realm was the giant, who was not very smart. Soren had to kill these heroic spirits first so that he could focus on fighting Eugene. Besides, killing these heroic spirits gave more divinity than killing the Son of Fear. The half-orc still had a lot of resources. Greater haste. Soren did not hesitate to use his last card. The +5 spell of the Lich Ring was instantly activated. Soren's speed suddenly increased to the point that the naked eye could not catch him. He turned into a shadow and continued to pounce on the heroic spirits behind him. Whirlwind. Eugene's old body trembled in an instant, and his face showed a hint of surprise. This time, he could no longer catch up with Soren's speed. He could only watch as Soren appeared beside the heroic spirits in an instant. The legendary curved sword turned into countless of blades that could not be caught by the naked eye. It was like a strange and cold light falling from the sky. Eugene waved his spear and stabbed at the giant wind elemental. He was shocked. How is this possible? How can a rogue master to whirlwind? This did not seem to be the first person to think that Soren could use whirlwind. The effect of greater haste was indeed very powerful, but it was still far from reaching the level of whirlwind. The reason why Soren looked like whirlwind was more because his attack speed was quite fast. Psionic blast. Butterfly finally got the chance to attack. She raised her middle finger in an instant, and the next moment, there was a burst of strong psionic energy. Psionic warlock? No. It's an advanced psionic warlock. Eugene's face was quite ugly. It was not until now that he found out that there was a powerful legendary figure among the enemies, and it was a very dangerous psionic warlock. Their strange abilities were only known to people in the astral plane. It was rare to encounter such an existence in the material plane. The figure of the heroic spirit stiffened for a moment. But this blink of an eye was enough for Soren. He activated the slaughter transformation and greater haste. Soren was now not so much a rogue, but a berserker with full power. Sword form, spinning strike. Shadow leap. Sword form, beheading. Shadow strike. The storm-like attack burst out in an instant with the help of a greater haste. The overwhelming sword light shrouded the heroic spirit holding the white bone spear. Then its body exploded like fireworks, and the whole person dissipated in the air with the wind. A row of data appeared in front of him, killed the heroic spirit. Extracting the target's soul energy. You've gained 36,000 slaughter EXP. The target is a divine creature. Extracting the target's divine power. Extraction failed. The target's body is not in the current plane. The power of divinity has been activated. Forcibly extracting the target's soul energy. Extraction successful. You've gained 4 divinity points. The Grey Wilderness. The second strange energy burst out like thunder and fell in the center of the altar of the temple. After the first statue of the heroic spirit shattered, then in the center of the altar of the temple, the 5 heroic spirit statues erected in the core area, the one on the far right also collapsed. The divine power on it gradually dissipated, and the fluctuations of the soul disappeared little by little. This heroic spirit statue seemed to have a different identity, and it also had a special power in this temple. When it also turned into broken stones all over the ground, there were traces of cracks on the whole altar. On the other side of the wilderness, the existence holding the skull silently watched all this and murmured, "It looks like the war of the gods. The war of the gods started so soon. It looks like the real era of chaos is coming. I should also make more preparations." 2 heroic spirits, 7 divinity points. At this moment, even Soren was a little excited. Such a harvest was simply unimaginable. I'm afraid. Even if he slaughtered an indigenous tribe of tens of thousands of people, he would not be able to get so many divinity points. But now, he just needed to kill these heroic spirits before Eugene. At this moment, Soren even hoped that Eugene could summon a few more heroic spirits. Anyway, he could still hold on for a while, and the greater haste spell was enough for him to kill a few more. The strength of the heroic spirits would be weakened when they were summoned to the material plane, and they could only retain about 80% of their combat power. If he really went to the Grey Wilderness to kill them, these heroic spirits would be at least 24 profession level or above. It was just like how the divine servants from another world were only at the legendary level, but in the divine kingdom, many of them were at the advanced legendary level or above. Cover me. Soren did not hesitate to rush to the last heroic spirit, and at the same time, ordered the psionic warlock to cover his surprise attack. At this moment, Eugene finally panicked a little. Even when facing the giant dragon, the frost giant king, and countless enemies, Eugene did not panic like this. But now, when facing Soren who was rushing to the heroic spirits at an amazing speed, Eugene's heart was in a mess. Because just at that moment, after Soren killed the heroic spirit he summoned, Eugene lost part of his connection with the ancestral spirit. No matter how he tried, he could not sense the heroic spirit he summoned. It was as if it had completely disappeared. Something was wrong. At this moment, even an idiot could feel that something was wrong. In the past, the heroic spirits had been killed, but they were only weakened for a period of time. Eugene could still sense their existence, and it would never be like now, where there was no news of them at all. It was as if they had completely fallen. Unfortunately, Soren would not give him a chance. He did not have the habit of giving his enemies a chance. With the psionic warlock's second burst of psionic energy, Soren's figure once again turned into a shadow and rushed forward. In an instant, he waved countless swords, each aimed at the enemy's fatal point. Since Eugene wanted to kill his only saint necromancer, Soren naturally had to return the favor and kill all the heroic spirits he summoned. The half-spirit body exploded like fireworks. As the countless faint lights dissipated, a row of data appeared in front of Soren's eyes. You have killed a heroic spirit. Extracting target's soul energy. You have received 21,000 slaughter EXP. Target is a divine creature. Extracting target's divine power. Extraction failed. Target's body is not in the current plane. Divinity activated. Forcibly extracting target's soul energy. Extraction successful. You have received 2 divinity. 3 hero spirits and 9 divinity points. At this moment, Soren felt unprecedentedly carefree. Such a big harvest was completely beyond his expectations. Although he still did not understand why. But Soren knew that at this moment, the heroic spirits that had been maintained by the orcs for a long time had probably suffered heavy losses. Most of the heroic spirits that could become heroic spirits were legendary figures when they were alive, and there were not many of them. In this battle, the orcs had lost at least hundreds of years of heritage. At this moment, Eugene finally felt afraid. What he was afraid of was not the battle, nor death, but Soren's strange ability. Any heroic spirits that died under his blade would lose contact with him, as if they had completely fallen. Eugene's heart was shrouded in a haze. He was very afraid that his guess was true. If that was the case, then the price he paid in this battle was too heavy. Heroic spirits. The orcs could only produce 1 legendary figure in the last 100 years, and the ancestral sacrifice needed a long time to gather divinity and transform into heroic spirits. If 3 heroic spirits fell at once, he would be a sinner of the clan. Eugene did not dare to summon again. Whether the heroic spirits had really fallen or not, he did not dare to summon them in front of Soren again. But if he did not summon the heroic spirits, his strength would be reduced by half. It was impossible for him to defeat Soren, who had the whirlwind in front of him with his own strength. The balance of the battle seemed to have tilted. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.